She's not telling him, we have a mating bond. I'm so certain that you're my mate. She's like, if we go out and say that we are mates, this is what the Fae are going to think. And who knows, maybe we are already mates. As if it's possible to not have an inclination, which we've just not seen in the Maasverse, right?
There was a Reddit post that the casting for Violet and Xaden is currently happening. I don't think we're getting a casting announcement at the end of this. I think it's definitely something about the not book 4, which is interesting because obviously we've heard crickets from Bloomsbury about anything related to ACOTAR 6, basically since the Call Her Daddy interview, which, guys, I will tell you, we're planning to do potentially a Dragons After Dark episode about. So that's a plug for Dragons After Dark. But we are very interested by whatever the fuck is going on at Bloomsbury with Sarah J. Maas, because the lack of publicity for this book has been kind of crazy. Our two biggest authors in this genre both have books coming out in the fall. And it seems like one's camp is maybe more on top of promoting that book than the other, is what I'm going to say, which seems impossible. It seems impossible, but it just, today is a very interesting time to be living in this world. And that world might completely change in a week, I think. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I'm excited for both. I'm going to read both these books. I want to be clear. I'm going to devour them, but
yeah. I would argue that neither, I'm not particularly concerned about the promotional efforts behind either one. Like, they're going to come out and it's going to explode. Like,
oh yeah.
People are promoting this book for them. Like, just to be sleuthing around every single thing that they post is marketing in and of itself.
We are doing the marketing for ACOTAR 6. Like, we are part of this machine. I recognize that.
Yeah.
So Bloomsbury, in theory, doesn't need to spend a dime, and that might just be what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I definitely think something weird is going on there. No, something weird is happening. They are clearly not, they don't seem to be, I shouldn't say clearly not. They do not appear to be one team right now, but that's an aside.
That's a plug for Dragons After Dark.
Plug for Dragons After Dark. Yeah.
We shall see. We shall see what the future holds. We shall see if we get the title soon.
Yeah. Shall we jump in? Do we
Sure.
have anything else?
Nothing.
No.
We are in the dog days of summer.
We really are. It's kind of, this is one of our probably weaker banter weeks. At least for me. It's not like I've not had things to discuss, but I don't have anything that I want you guys to experience with me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I listened to our Bryce Part 2 deep dive this morning because we're releasing it today. So that will give you guys a sense of what day it is that we're recording. And I was like, holy shit, our banter section was about bugs and feet. What the fuck were we thinking?
I know. I texted you about this, but I've been I've been trying to find bathing suits. Like, I've been trying to shop for swimsuits. And I know you said you found some on Quince that you liked. There are no white ones. So I'm supposed to find some for my wedding. And I have ordered I've ordered probably 8 swimsuits by now. And everyone, don't panic. I'm returning 6 or 7 of them. Okay. Because they all are not working. They're just not working. I don't know what's going on in the world of swimsuits right now. It feels like either there's simply no material, nothing covers anything, or it's basically...
I thought you meant there was a shortage of white swimsuits. There's not enough material to make swimsuits.
No, it's an Australian style swimsuit. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Or it's basically a sports swimsuit where you could swim laps in it. And I'm just what happened? 5 years ago, this wasn't a problem, which is the last time probably that I bought swimsuits. Actually, probably even earlier. I don't know that I've bought new swimsuits since college.
Well, here's the good news. Now that we have had this conversation, you will get inundated with ads for swimsuits. So the answer will present itself to you. Don't worry.
I'm getting inundated with ads, okay? I'm buying a lot of swimsuits, okay?
Give me the ads.
A lot of swimsuits.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I think you have to say into the mic right now very specifically what it is you want, and you will find it.
Guys, strapless swimsuits, no tan lines, preferably, doesn't need to be, but preferably at least a backdrop of white or green. Green would be fine too. That's it.
All right, algorithm.
It's not a high bar.
Do your thing.
Just like not a thong. Like, what's the problem? It's not good.
I think if I'm being quite honest, I think it's the Kardashians. I think the Kardashians have done this. I think we can lay blame at their feet for this. And I don't like it.
Yeah. It's tough. I don't know. Yeah.
I just think the algorithm knows exactly what you want now. I think you've been so good being so descriptive of what it is you're looking for. And
TikTok, Instagram.
The TikTok gods shall provide. They shall provide.
Please and thanks. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I'm Ronnie.
I'm Abby.
And this is Dragons in the Details, the podcast that helps you better understand your favorite fantasy books through a series of deep dive episodes. This season, we are covering Crescent City. Disclaimer, this episode will contain Crescent City and ACOTAR spoilers. All 8 published books, 5 ACOTAR books, 3 Crescent City books as of July. I think we're still in July 2026. And that is because 1, we have already had an ACOTAR season. So if you're with us, you're probably coming from our ACOTAR season. And 2, if you've read Crescent City, you understand why we have ACOTAR spoilers.
We did. Someone DM'd me on Instagram. I was like, hey, I saw your Bryce deep dive. Like, can I just listen to that without having listened to any of your other episodes? I was like, you can try. I was like, at least listen to the Starboard deep dive, though. Yeah, like, I think you have to listen to Starboard, but we'll try.
Yeah. Would suggest the Starborn one before Bryce. I don't know. It's tough because I feel badly going back over entire theories again, but I feel like we try to at least bring them up. I don't know. I just listen to the whole season. It's fun. We're a good time.
We're a good time.
Other disclaimer, this podcast is rated R. So these are spicy books. We say spicy words. We curse. So please recommend caution when listening to it with children. Each week, we dive into a specific topic in depth. This week, we are diving into Hunt, Bryce, Azriel, and all of that stuff. So we have had a Bryce deep dive that was 2 parts. We talked for 4 hours on Bryce, basically. We edited it down to, I think, 3.5, maybe.
Oh, no. I think we talked for 6 hours and edited it to 4.
Sure. Then we did a Hunt deep dive. That was a couple hours. And we didn't talk about anything related to Hunt and Bryce being mates, Bryce and Azriel, what's going on there. That is all for this episode. So we are going to talk about Hunt, Bryce, their matehood, their powers interacting, the Bryceriel of it all of that stuff. We have said in the past that we were done talking about it. We lied. Here we are. We hear you. We're here. We're here to talk about it. I know Abby has said in the past, and I agree with this, we are not staking a claim in the Bryceriel camp in this episode. I know that you guys have a lot of evidence supporting Bryce and Azriel. We're going to talk about that. We know that there's a lot to dig into. So we come with receipts. We have quotes to back up our theories so you can follow along if you are skeptical. Announcements, Abby.
Just add to what you just said. This is the first episode I've ever done this because, as you guys know, I've gone on record as seeing absolutely no reasoning behind Bryceriel, right? So that's why we've never talked about it before, right? Because we like to present our own theories, and I have said, I don't understand. I don't know where this is coming from. So what I have done is outsourced our research, basically, right? So we actually asked some of our listeners who identify as Bryceriel, hey, can you help us put together some bullet points? I've searched Reddit. I've done a lot of research, so I know where this is coming from a lot more now. There's a lot for us to talk about, but I will just say this is the first time we've done this, so we'll see how it goes. And if you like it, maybe we do more of this, or maybe we never do this again. We're going to find out. This is a bit of an experimental episode. Announcements, as always, our deep dive music is brought to you by Schwoodley. That is SCHWOODLEY. You can find them on Spotify. This is a somewhat new announcement. We are now on Patreon. So if you want to support us there and watch exclusive content, we are on Patreon. That is available to you now. We're very excited about it. We have 3 tiers of membership. With some of those tiers, what you're going to get is exclusive content from us. So as we mentioned, we have an extra, it's kind of a sister series, Dragons After Dark, that is going to be only available to our Patreon subscribers. We gave you guys the first couple episodes to give you a taste. But moving forward, that is going to be available only on our Patreon. What we are also doing is doing a lot of written content for you. So you're going to get a version of the prep that we do for these episodes, as well as some overall theories written up, some diagrams, and some episode synopses. So kind of all of our written content that is going to be living on Patreon moving forward. So there's a lot in there, guys. And we know that sometimes we talk about our theories like we know them very well, because we do, but we know that you guys might not. So if you need some reading material to kind of say, hey, what the hell are these guys talking about? I don't understand. Our goal is to have all of that on Patreon. So we hope that you enjoy that. Last thing this season, we are also outsourcing our fun questions to you guys. So you can submit fun questions to us anywhere. We are keeping track of them. Some of you guys have great fun questions. We're really excited about that. So yeah, if you have a fun question that you want us to ask each other on the pod, submit it wherever you reach out to us normally. So that can be email, that can be Discord, that can be Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, wherever. We will scoop it up and we will put it in our fun question tracker. That is it for announcements.
Sweet. All right. So this week's fun question is from Tangle Zoo on YouTube. I don't know whether I'm saying that right. I'm so sorry, Tangle Zoo, if I'm getting this wrong. TANGLEZU. So
Tangles you?
Tanglezu? I don't,
it's so hard, guys. It's so hard.
Let me just do a quick click, see what Tangles. The name is just Tangles. So this is a fun question from Tangles. Which characters from ACOTAR and Crescent City would you choose to throw your bachelorette party and plan your wedding? Abby, who are you choosing?
Lydia Servos.
Both?
Every time.
For both?
Yeah, both. Yeah, both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she pulled off the hit on the spine. She's been a double agent for years. Like, that woman can plan like nothing I've ever seen. It's Lydia Servos every time. That's it. That's my answer.
Yeah. Interesting. I definitely agree for the wedding. The bachelorette party, what is Lydia doing for, what kind of, complicated psyop bachelorette are you having?
Okay, well, I'm not having a bachelorette party. So, I really focused on the wedding one. I guess I could say Bryce for the bachelorette party because Bryce knows how to have a good time. But yes, I see what you're saying. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think for my bachelorette, which I'm also not having a bachelorette, but if I were to have a bachelorette, I would choose the House of Wind to plan my bachelorette because I would love to stay home and
read with chocolate cake.
Bubble party with a bunch of random weird wishes and cake and food and all that good stuff. And I think I like the Lydia idea. I think for planning my wedding, I think I would still probably go with Elaine. And I do think I would have to kind of heavily guide her towards a slightly more dark academia vibe, which is currently what I'm constantly doing. I'm literally what about some darker candelabras? And they're literally fighting me on it. But I think when she sees the vision,
I'm so excited for your wedding.
There's not going to be dark candelabras because they won't allow it. They won't allow it.
But the opera?
But I think once Elaine sees the vision, I feel like she would live for that shit. I feel like she would have a lot of fun doing it. And it would make her happy. And she would bring a positive energy of wanting to plan something like that. And she would do a great job with the florals, without a doubt.
I don't think Lydia would bring a good vibe to the function necessarily. I just think she would be very good at planning, but not in a hand-holdy nice way.
Yeah,
I agree.
That was one question. Thank you, Tangles. All right, COSMS, corrections, omissions, social media shoutouts. Abby, do you have any to share with the class?
I have two. So the first one is from Instagram, from the account For the Babes Co. Hello, For the Babes Co. So they wrote, totally random thought today after binging your podcast. Thank you. After listening to the beginning of your Crescent City episodes, I am wondering, why did the Daemati seem to come in pairs? The murder twins and the siblings in ACOTAR, Dagden and Branna. Are Rhys and Rune's twins somehow, separated at birth, the phantom wings? Something is going on for sure, but I'm not sure what. So what I really like about this message that I hadn't really thought about is the idea of Daemati coming in pairs. I think we can add Celine and Helena to that list as well of Daemati coming in pairs. And Rhys doesn't have a pair. Right? Rhys doesn't have someone. Rune, we don't know if he's a full Daemati. He doesn't mention having that power once he takes the antidote to the parasite, right? But I do think it's interesting kind of leaving Rune out of it for a second, even that Rhys is one unto himself, right? Rhys is one of one. That's something Sarah has said before. He does not have a twin or a partner in his Daemati abilities when every other Daemati we've seen has come in pairs. I thought that was an interesting idea. Don't have more to say on it than that, but...
Yeah, I think it is interesting. Again, the level of similarity between Rhys and Rune makes absolutely no sense unless they are twins or doppelgangers. Yeah, doesn't. So I like the idea.
I mean, they are different ages. Rhys is 500 and Rune is 70. But
Time's Rift.
I have another one. All right. So this is from Taylor B. Hi, Taylor. I know you're a frequent listener and commenter. So hello. Lovely to hear from you. So Taylor wrote, Hi, Dragons. I am rereading Crescent City and noticed some things in House of Flame and Shadow that I found interesting. I can't remember if you guys touched on these in your episodes. Forgive me if you noted these already. Love you guys in the podcast so much. So happy you're doing Dragons After Dark. And an Alchemized episode. I can't wait to listen. That's a plug for our Alchemized episode, which is available anywhere. That one's not on Patreon. So listen to that if you want to. Okay, first, House of Flame and Shadow, chapter 68. That is Crescent City 3 for all of you who don't know what book is which book. So this is Crescent City 3, chapter 68. Potential evidence for Bryce perhaps having secret or unknown Daemati powers. Context is, this is when she's fighting the murder twins Morven and the Autumn King. Quote is, even Hunt's lightning wasn't fast enough as the murder twins sprang for her with swords drawn, right as their shadowy talons scraped down the wall of her mind. It stopped today. Bryce exploded into the twins' minds, their bodies flooding them with starfire. A part of her recoiled in horror as their huge forms crumpled to the ground, steaming holes where their eyes had been, where their brains had been. She'd melted their minds. Taylor then writes, she melted their minds. She wrote it in caps, sorry for the screaming. Is very Reese vibes when he describes what he can do with his powers and the way she explodes into their minds. It is a bit confusing because the twins are Daemati, so maybe she's able to do this because of their powers, but it's interesting, especially when she has mentioned that the Starborn abilities generally include mind speaking, which you guys have talked about. Will this manifest now that the parasite is being addressed? Who's to say? Could be something, could be nothing. I love this. I remembered that scene and I remember thinking, oh, like Bryce has shields. Like Bryce shields her mind with starlight, right? Because I believe at this point, Rune kind of goes around and just kind of taps on everyone's shields when the murder twins are about and like make sure that they're there. So I'm like, oh, Bryce has shields. But we later find out Lydia has shields. Even Therian has shields. His shields are water. So I didn't really think anything of it. But the fact that she melts their minds is pretty fucking crazy. I mean, I think that's pretty wild. And we did see, I believe we saw Rhys do something similar to this under the mountain with whoever was High Lord of Summer before Tarquin. I believe that's who it was, like all the way back in ACOTAR book 1. It wasn't this violent, to be clear. But I think he just basically kills him with his mind, essentially.
He took away their pain and then shattered their mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
She has also had moments, it's usually during sex scenes with Hunt, where she thinks she's not speaking out loud and then Hunt responds. There's been some moments, right, where you're like, what is going on with Bryce and mind speaking? Yeah, I totally agree.
Yep. All right. What do you have? So thank you, Taylor. I really love that. That was a great call. Great catch.
Love that, Taylor. I have one little one. It's a comment from Mustang Sally on the What's Going On with Ember Quinlan TikTok. And it's just remember the part where Ember hid in a city called Helene. Literally just Helena and Selene, those two names combined. And I just don't I don't know how much of this Sarah needs to be intentional with versus not, but I just love that even that early in, chapter 30 or whatever it is of Crescent City 1, we are getting Helena and Selene little breadcrumbs. So good point, Mustang Sally.
Yep. We love it.
Cool. All right. Shall we deep dive?
We shall.
Okay. Abby, what happens when Bryce's and Hunt's powers interact?
All right. So this is a really big question, guys. So once again, strap in. I feel like I actually don't even know if this is going to be the majority of the episode, but I think this is really interesting and there's a lot to talk about. So as early as Crescent City 1, we get a couple hints that Bryce and Hunt's powers are attracted to each other. So the quotes we have, just as a reminder, the first time that Hunt kisses her, Bryce's star starts to shine. So the quote is, just a hint of a kiss, a feather soft glancing of his lips over hers, a star bloomed inside her at that kiss. A long slumbering light began to fill her chest, her veins. Now, I will say, this is when she's getting the Crystallis venom removed from her leg. So it could be related to the venom, could be related to the kiss. We don't know. Both of these things are happening at the same time. We do later get from her, it had blocked her access to the light, that being the venom, but not what lay stamped in her blood. The moment the venom had come out of her leg, as Hunt's lips had met hers that first time, she'd felt it awaken again. So two things happen, right? We get the venom removed, but also Hunt's lips meet hers and her star starts to awaken again. We know that Hunt's lightning sings for her. The quote we get, this is Crescent City 1, chapter 81. Vengeance incarnate, wrath bruised heart, she would bow for no one. Hunt's lightning sang at the sight of that brutal, beautiful face. So this is when Hunt is at the summit and he's watching Bryce kill Micah basically on the CCTV. And he says he sees her face and we get Hunt's lightning sang at the sight of that beautiful face. Sorry, at the sight of that brutal, beautiful face. So his lightning is literally like responding to her, which is very kind of Azrael's shadows, right? It's very like we've seen Azrael's shadows react differently to different people. And now Hunt's lightning is kind of independent of him singing for Bryce. Mm-hmm. We also have this line when Bryce is making her drop and he is bringing her back to life. His power felt it coming a moment later, recognized her like seeing itself in the mirror. So he's saying his power recognized Bryce's power coming back and it was like seeing itself in a mirror, which I think is a really interesting line. We talked about the similarities of these two powers in our last episode, in the Hunt episode, but it's literally saying it's like seeing itself, even though we think these powers have, no matter what, these powers should have different sources. Right? Like, because the Princes of Hell didn't say, oh, we made the Starborn Fae too, right? The Princes of Hell said, we made the Thunderbirds, but the Starborn Fae we think are made from the Asteri. But either way, it's going to be different sources because the Princes of Hell did not make the Starborn Fae. So in Crescent City 2, we start to get more of this. So the quotes we have are, Bryce had developed a keen awareness of Hunt's presence, like scenting lightning on the wind. He had only to enter a room and she'd know if he was there by that surge of power in her body, like her magic, her very blood answered to his, right? So the surge of power in her body, her magic is answering to his magic. This is not about them as people. This is about their magics reacting to each other. We get in chapter 6, though she could detect no outward sign of it, Hunt's lightning seemed to crackle in the air around him. Or maybe that was Hunt's presence once again doing funny things to her senses. Bryce lifted the first aid kit, found it. So here we have kind of a conflation of the two, right? So obviously Hunt and Bryce love each other. So Bryce is saying, oh, like maybe the crackling I'm feeling is my love for him, but maybe I'm actually feeling his power, even though there's no outward signs of it, right? We don't really know. And then in chapter 12, we get Hunt rose from the table and stalked to Bryce's side. His power shimmered up her body, electrifying her very blood at his nearness. Is the River Queen insane or are you insane? That's Crescent City 2, chapter 12. So his power is electrifying her body, even though he's not actually doing anything to her, right? It's his power. And then we have the famous line from Apollyon. We read that last episode. We're going to read it here. Your powers are more similar than you realize. Conduits, both of you. You have no idea how valuable you and the others like you are. And just as a recap for what we talked about last episode, both Bryce and Hunt seem to have the ability to absorb. Bryce can absorb first light, but let's just say power in general. And Hunt can absorb electricity. Hunt can absorb first light. Hunt can absorb different types of power. And we know that because Sophie Renest could. And Hunt and Sophie have similar types of power. And expel it as either lightning or first light or any other type of power. So both of them have this ability to take in power and expel it as something else potentially. So that's potentially what the conduits line means. But then I have really, really crazy sex scenes, unlike anything we've seen in the Maasverse. And being conduits doesn't fully explain what the fuck is going on here. So let's kind of get into it. We'll start with the gym scene. I'm not going to read too many explicit lines with the gym scene, but do know this is going to get spicy later. So we know he zaps her with some lightning and she flares with starlight. Their powers aren't really commingling yet. But even so, she says she could have sworn they fell through time and space, could have sworn they tumbled towards something, but she wanted to stay here with him in this body and in this place, right? So even though they're not teleporting yet, even though they're not really commingling their powers yet, she says she could have sworn they fell through time and space, could have sworn they tumbled towards something. This is going to be a continuous theme as Hunt and Bryce have sex. Almost every time they have sex, and it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, they start basically traveling through space. Yes, they teleport, but then they stop teleporting and something else starts happening. And I'm not totally sure what that something else else is. So let's talk about the depth charger scene. A couple of interesting things happen in this scene. This is when we really start to see their powers commingling. So we get lightning danced down her skin, along her hair, and she basked in it. Took it into herself, let herself become it, become him, and let him become her until they were two souls twining together at the bottom of the sea. Bryce had the vague sense of falling through air, through time and space, and then she found herself laid gently, reverently on the mossy ground. Like even in his need, his fury, he wanted her safe and well, feeling only pleasure. So we think we're about to be set up for a winnow, right? Because Sarah says Bryce had the vague sense of falling through air, through time and space, but actually it's Hunt picking her up. But it's like they haven't even really started doing anything. It's just Hunt's power within her is giving her this sense of falling through space and time, right? The star on her chest flared, merging with his lightning. He laid a hand atop it, claiming the star, claiming the light, claiming her. So her star is merging with his lightning. His power flowed over her, filled her, and she was him and he was her. His wings were a wall of gray above them. His wings were glowing. They filled with iridescent light. He filled with light. Bryce reached a hand toward his blazing wings, her own fingers, her hand, her arm. They radiated the same light, as if they had become filled with power, as if her light had leaked into him and his into her. So they are trading powers, right? His lightning is going into her. It is becoming part of her. Her light is going into him. His wings are glowing with starlight. We have never, as far as I can remember, gotten a sex scene like this in the Maasverse. Like we have never had this trading of powers before. We've never had
characters that have the power to absorb other people's power before. Like that's not existed.
Right.
So this is unique.
At least other than a kernel of High Lord's power. But yes.
Yeah. Well, Pharaoh was dead. So
Pharaoh was dead.
That's how he did that.
I think I want to read an interesting line here too, right? So his wings were glowing. They filled with iridescent light. He filled with light. He absorbs her power, right? We know that she can absorb his power. She does that all the time. He is absorbing his power. However, we've talked about not really knowing what Bryce's power is, if it is starlight or if it is first light. I think we have some more things to add to the mystery here. We know that Hunt does not feel like flayed when he absorbs his power, which would point to it not being first light. However, we have a quote from Sophie about absorbing first light. She said, "The first light always hurt so much worse than electricity, charged her insides, even as it left her craving more of its potent power. It was why she avoided it as much as possible." That line's going to be important in the next sex scene. So just remember that Sophie said that she craved more first light, even as she tried to avoid it. And then we know that they winnow, right? So we get, she was falling, had the distant sense of screaming her pleasure to the surface miles above, of an orgasm rocking through her, reducing her mind to rubble. She was vaguely conscious of Hunt pumping into her, spilling into her over and over, falling through time and space and light and shadow. Up was down and down was up, and they were the only beings in existence here in this garden, locked away from time. I mean, it's winnowing, but it feels so much more. It feels so much more than what we've gotten from other winnowings, right? We have up was down and down was up, and they were the only beings in existence here in this garden, locked away from time. You talked about in our Bryce episode part 2 about how dust courts seem to exist outside of time because Rigelus says that it was perpetually twilight, right? It was a land of perpetual twilight. And now Bryce is saying when they are joined, when their powers are joined, they are locked away from time. I don't know if it's hyperbolic. Hyperbolic?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's hyperbolic or if it's meant literally, but this is big language. This is big language to describe their sex scenes.
Yeah.
That's all I had for Depth Charger. Did you have anything you wanted to add for that one? I'm just going to go sex scene by sex scene here.
No, I think we need to get to Avallen.
Okay. Oh, patience.
Well, I think what you just described, like the timelessness and the connection to the dust court magic, I feel like it really comes into play once we get to the Avallen
Totally.
part.
A couple of things I want to talk about before we get there. So the next time they have sex is in her apartment after the ball. We get a similar thing, but what I think is interesting is it's clear that it's involuntary at this point. So we get she glowed and he was glowing too, not with her starlight, but fuck, his lightning was crackling down his arms, his hands skittering over her hips up to her breasts. It's involuntary. He doesn't know that he's doing this, right? It is literally his power coming out to meet hers, basically, right? Like kind of coming out to play. Again, kind of similar to Azrael, we've seen his shadows dancing with, I guess, Gwyn's power? I don't quite remember. I think it was Gwyn's power. Like, I think we've had similar imagery for Azriel's power. We get lightning filled the room and he kissed her through it, tongues meeting, ether flooding his senses. He could never get enough of this connection, the sex, this powerful flowing between them. He needed it more than he needed food, water, needed this sharing of magic, this twining of souls. He'd never stop craving it. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to remind you all of that quote from Sophie that I read about the last sex scene, right? So what Sophie said was, the first light always hurt so much worse than the electricity, charred her insides, even as it left her craving more of its potent power. And here, what Hunt is saying, this power flowing between them, he needed it more than he needed food, water, needed this sharing of magic, this twining of souls. He'd never stop craving it. So is part of this the power that's flowing between them? Is it because Hunt's basically bred to crave this power, which I think is an interesting idea. And then they winnow again. So they have sex in the Fae archives. Not that interesting. Nothing really happens, except that we do get this quote because they don't winnow. So Bryce says, must need your power to join mine or something. She mumbled, good thing you didn't do that though. Probably would have burned the building down, but I don't care right now. So it's interesting that it doesn't always happen. I don't know why it does and doesn't happen. Okay, so now we're in the Avallen scene. And this scene is crazy. We're just kind of going to go through it beat by beat. So first, Bryce starts glowing, kind of similar to how we see Feyre glowing with Rhys. Not that crazy. We've seen her do it before, but I'm just pointing it out because it also seems involuntary, the same way that Hunt's lightning felt involuntary. So the quote is, then Hunt was over her, and Bryce let her joy, her magic shine through her. Starborn light so silvery bright, it cast shadows upon the bed. Like it, you're so fucking beautiful, he whispered. Lightning gathered around his wings, his brow, like his power couldn't help but answer hers, even with the halo's damper on it. So again, it seems involuntary for both of them. Their powers are playing together. Then we get, their magics collided, their souls. She scattered across the stars, across galaxies, lightning skittering in her wake. She had the dim sense of Hunt being thrown with her, of his shout of ecstasy and surprise. Knew that their bodies remained joined in some distant world, but here, in this place between places, all they were melted into one, crossed over and transferred and becoming something more. Stars and planets and rainbow clouds of nebulas swirled around them. Sun and moon held together in perfect balance, suspended in the same sky. And beneath them, far below, she could see Avallen thrumming with their magic, so much magic, as if Avallen were the very source of it, as if they were the very source of all magic and light and love. Possibly the craziest segment I've ever read in the Maasverse. This is fucking wild. So let's kind of go through this, at least the back half of this, line by line. I literally wrote in my notes, what the fuck is happening? So, knew their bodies remained joined in some distant world, but here in this place between places, right? That's part of this. This is how Apollyon describes pocket realms. So what Apollyon says is, you and I are in a place between our worlds, a pocket realm, as it were. It is also how the Underking describes the place where he is from / the void. I think this is a weird sentence, so I'll just read it and then we'll talk about it. But the Underking says, I hail from a place between the stars, a place that has no name and never shall, but I know of the void that the princes of hell worship. It birthed me too. The Underking is saying, I hail from a place of no name, but I'm birthed from the void. I'm like, I don't really think that makes sense.
I think he's saying that he hails from a place that is not the void, though. I think is what he's saying. Like, there's a place between stars that has no name. I know of the void, though. It birthed me, too.
So he lived in a place between the stars. Right. That's what I'm saying. To me, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but yeah. So again, that line is, knew that their bodies remained joined in some distant worlds, but here in this place between places, it's giving pocket realms, it's giving void imagery. They are not where their bodies are, right? Their souls have traveled somewhere else. All they were melted into one, crossed over and transferred, becoming something more. You mentioned this last episode that their powers feel like two halves of a coin, right? And here we are saying all they were melted into one. They're becoming one, crossed over and transferred. His power into her power into him, becoming something more. Whatever they are as one is more than the sum of their parts. Like whatever this is bigger than just what they can each bring to the table, is how I'm reading this. Like, this is something, some third thing that happens when they merge their powers. I don't totally know what it is, but it's more than just lightning. It's more than just starlight. It is something else that is happening here when they merge their powers like this. Stars and planets and rainbow clouds of nebulas swirled around them. They're in space. They're not where their bodies are. They are in space. They are somewhere else. Sun and moon held together in perfect balance, suspended by the same sky. So we are being told they are the sun and the moon. They are the sun and the moon in this sky. I don't know which one's which. I actually really wouldn't know which one's which. I would guess Hunt's the sun and Bryce is the moon, but I don't really know. They don't really have... Yeah.
I don't know. Especially because Selene is linked to moon goddess.
Yeah. And beneath them, far below, she could see Avallen thrumming with their magic. So much magic, as if Avallen were the very source of it, as if they were the very source of all magic and light and love. I mean, Bryce is saying they are the source of all magic. Like, this union of them together is the source of all magic. I mean, she's saying as if they were the source of all magic, but this is typically what Sarah does, right? She says as if it were this, and then it turns out it actually was that. I think this is crazy. I have thoughts, but that's kind of the line for line beat. Do you have more you want to add here?
I have thoughts, certainly. It is described crazily, and it is. I have like a couple real things that we have been presented with that I think it can tie to. One is, it does seem like they are leaving this world, right? Like, their souls are leaving this world. Their bodies are joined in some distant world, but their souls are elsewhere, right? So that is kind of consistent with what we've been told, and that Hunt was created to basically help Bryce world walk if she did not have the necessary thirds of Thea's star that she would need to do so. And then the quote that I put in bold, where I was like, this is important. Obviously, all of it's important, but Avallen thrumming with their magic, so much magic, as if Avallen were the very source of it, as if they were the very source of all magic and light and love. It seems like they might be the only High Lord and Lady existent on Midgard. Like, isn't that what High Lords and Ladies are? Like, that is what they are on Prythian. If the High Lords didn't have magic, then their court would not have magic. Like, that's their purpose. They are like the apex of all court power. So like, they are the magic of the land. But what does it mean that Hunt's power needs to be involved for this to happen? Because you would expect, right, based on what we've learned, for it to just be Bryce for Bryce to be sufficient.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So what I said was, I have more thoughts on this, but like, I think this sounds like Kalanmai. Like, I think this sounds like what Kalanmai is actually supposed to be. And this is a crazy quote. I pulled this from ACOTAR, but this is Lucian telling Feyre about Kalanmai. Each of the 7 High Lords of Prythian performs this every year, since their magic comes from the earth and returns to it at the end. It's a give and take, okay? As a reminder, we've read this a couple times now. And beneath them, far below, she could see Avallen thrumming with their magic. So much magic. That's a give. As if Avallen were the very source of it, as if they were the very source of all magic and light and love, right? So it is a give and a take. It is a cycle. So, but what is it, I asked, and he clicked his tongue. Tonight, Tam will allow great and terrible magic to enter his body, Lucian said, staring at the distant fires. The magic will seize control of his mind, his body, and soul, and turn him into the hunter, guys. Like, is that fucking wild? I think that's wild. It will fill him with his sole purpose to find the maiden. From their coupling, magic will be released and spread to the earth, where it will regenerate life for the year to come. So I'm not saying, I think Kalanmai is bullshit on Prythian at this point. Like, I don't think what Tamlin's doing is really doing this, but this feels like what that is supposed to be, right? This feels like this is the actual true version.
This is like real
Kalanmai. Yeah, like this is what it actually is supposed to be. Like, from their coupling, they are creating magic for the land. It's exactly what you just said. And the fact that his name is Hunt and it says Tamlin becomes the hunter, I thought was kind of crazy. But yeah. But it also feels bigger than that, right? Like, I would say it feels bigger than that. It feels like they are creating here. Like, it feels like they're creating something here. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's like creation of worlds, like sun and moon. Like, I don't know. It's kind of wild.
I agree that it feels bigger, but it also is like, I don't know, we've never had a first person POV of Kalanmai, and I feel like it probably feels fucking crazy. like the real version of it. Like you were literally seeding the land with magic for a year. I don't know. Like I would expect a description to feel wild, but the fact that they also seem to be like basically world walking at the same time is adding this exponential degree to it that's just insane. Like they basically have an aerial view of Avallen while they're creating Avallen's magic, which is nuts.
Which is nuts. And then
we do get, Bryce saying that Hunt was like made effectively. Afterwards.
Yeah. So we get a little more of this. So this is I think what you're referencing. So this is from Hunt. It had been more than fucking or sex or lovemaking. Hunt stared down at her, starlight shimmering in his hair. Just as she knew, lightning licked through her own. It felt like my power went into you, Hunt said, eyes tracking the lightning as it slithered down your body. Her body, it's yours. As mine is yours, she said, touching a fleck of starlight glittering between the sable locks of his hair. So yeah, basically she's making him, but he's making her too. We talked in the last episode about the Thunderbirds being able to imbue their power into objects. Like they're making each other here, I think. And then we get a little more. I guess it flows both ways, my power into you and yours into me. Hunt smiled and surveyed the room around them. At least we seem to be past ending up somewhere new every time we fuck. Bryce snorted. That's a relief. I don't think Morven would have appreciated our naked asses landing in his room. But what difference does it make that we're connected this way? Bryce lifted her head to kiss him. Another thing for us to figure out. So that's Crescent City 3, chapter 50. I don't know if that line, what difference does it make, another thing for us to figure out, is building up to the mask reveal, or if it feels bigger than the mask reveal, right? It feels bigger than Hunt is able to wear the mask because some of her maid essence is in him. To me, it feels like we're going towards something bigger, but it could have been the mask reveal. I don't really know. But yeah. And then I have one last thing. This scene is so similar. We've talked about this before, but this scene is almost beat for beat the sex scene we get with Rhys and Feyre in the cabin in ACOTAR chapter 55. So the quote we have is, you know what? I'm just going to read the first sex scene again real quick so that you guys can see how similar this is. Then Hunt was over her and Bryce let her joy, her magic shine through her. Look at you, Hunt breathed, his hips flexing beneath her hands. Look at you. Bryce smiled as she let more of that power shine through her. Starborn light so silvery bright it cast shadows upon the bed. Like it? You're so fucking beautiful, he whispered. Lightning gathered around his wings, his brow, like his power couldn't help but answer hers, even with the halo stamper on it. So that is Hunt and Bryce. Rhys and Feyre, look at you, he murmured as he moved in me and kissed the length of my spine. I managed to rise up enough to see where we were joined, to see the sunlight shimmer off me against the rippling night of him, merging and blending, enriching. But I would glow for him, I'd glow. For my own future, I'd glow. So I sat up and unleashed that light in me, letting it drive out the darkness of what had been done to him, my mate, my friend. Rhys barked my name, thrusting his hips up. Stars wheeled as he slammed deep. I think the light pouring out of me might have been starlight. Or maybe my own vision fractured as Release barreled into me again and Rhys found his, gasping my name over and over as he spilled himself in me. Very similar, guys. These are very similar scenes, right? So we haven't gotten this quite as much with Rhys and Feyre, but we know that Rhys and Bryce have a shared ancestor. So it does feel like it's intentional that they're so similar. There's some kind of power here that we haven't fully explored. And then they have sex one more time before the final battle, but there's not really, basically he gets some of her maid power in that. One interesting thing we have is, this isn't even really about their powers, but just about Hunt in general. His lightning was sparking over his shoulders, across his wings, a band of it over his brow like a crown. She lifted a glowing hand and his lightning twined over her fingers, zapping. Right. So Hunt has had the black crown for most of the story, but now Sarah is giving Hunt a lightning crown. We know he's the son of princes of hell, but typically when Sarah gives a character a crown, it does mean that they are going to be royalty in one way or another. And I don't think him being married to Bryce and a prince of the Fae counts, right? Because that's been removed. That's no longer relevant. But we know that Rhys was always putting Feyre in crowns even before he made her High Lady. So is this a similar thing where Bryce will make Hunt High Lord because he has this crown imagery? Yeah, I don't really think there's anything else that crazy.
Yeah, I think Avallen's the craziest. craziest.
I think Avallen is the crazy one. Oh, we do have one thing. Sorry. And this is the similar to the Thunderbirds conversation. Inside her, his lightning lingered, fueling her up like a small sun. No matter what happens tomorrow, she said, breathing hard, I'll have this piece of you with me, strengthening me. She could almost summon it, that lightning. It flowed under her skin, so full of possibility that she had no idea how she'd sleep. So she's saying she could almost summon lightning, which feels very similar to the Thunderbirds, right? Like she can take in his power and then have it be whatever she wants, or have it be his power, it sounds like. Like she can truly just be a conduit. It really feels like with this, we have only just kind of scratched the surface, and that there's going to be a lot more coming with it. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Like Apollyon kind of said that directly, and Hunt just was like, scoff.
Well, that was early in book 2, though. We've had a book and a half since that.
Yeah, but I mean, all they've done is use the horn.
Right. I would agree.
So lots more to do.
All right. Anything else on that one?
I'm looking through. I don't think so. I think we got most of it. I don't think we're going to find an answer to this, but like their powers are so similar, yet obviously different enough that a combination creates something unique. And so like, what is the difference? Because we know that Hunt was created by Hell. We suspect that Bryce has Asteri in her blood. So are these two, and we've discussed this in the past, like are these two parts of a whole, two sides of a coin? It like seems like the two of them together, if they like ran through the same bloodline, could be crazy. Like could be crazy. Like what happens if they procreate?
Well, the Autumn King was extremely concerned about that, if you'll recall.
Right. Yeah.
Very worried about what kind of child Hunt and Bryce would have together.
Right.
I am very excited about what kind of child Hunt and Bryce might have together. Yeah. All right. Next question. Ronnie, are Hunt and Bryce really mates?
Okay. So to be honest, I do think that the answer to this is yes. But I also acknowledge that there is enough here, in my opinion, to investigate. Sarah seems to have intentionally introduced some things to cause doubt and like small breaks in mate behavioral pattern that we can discuss. So I'm going to start with my own independent thoughts, and then we can discuss thoughts from the community. Because I know you have reached out to folks. Big thanks to Swizzy, Anastasia, Nina for sharing thoughts via DM, comments. I know there's all sorts of stuff over Reddit on this. So I'll also say that we're doing this pre-Maasverse spoilers, pre-Throne of Glass spoilers. We have more after Throne of Glass spoilers, so we'll focus more heavily on it in the Throne of Glass sections. If you haven't read Throne of Glass, do it. Okay, so are Bryce and Hunt really mates? This is my independent research, not influenced by anything on Reddit, and then we can talk about stuff on Reddit afterwards. All right. I'm going to start with the case against Hunt and Bryce as mates, like the stuff that gives me pause, and then we'll talk about all of the stuff, because there is a lot that makes the case for them being mates. So there are admittedly some fishy things going on when it comes to Hunt and Bryce. I get that their mating is weird and different. Hunt is told some weird stuff, and Bryce behaves in strange ways at certain points. So I'll dig into all of those. Weird thing number one, right? And we talked about this last week. The Oracle, whose predictions on Rune's future and Cormax's future has been cryptic but accurate, does tell Hunt to stay away from Bryce in book 1, right? So House of Earth and Blood, chapter 33, Crescent City 1. Do you wish to know what I see in your future, Orion Athalar? He recoiled at the sound of his birth name like he'd been punched in the gut. No one has spoken that name in 200 years, he whispered. The name your mother gave you. Yes, he ground out, his gut twisting at the memory of his mother's face, the love that had always shone. This is such a long quote. I'm just going to skip to the end. You remind me of that which was lost long ago, she said quietly. I had not realized it might ever appear again. Before Hunt dared ask what that meant, her lion's tail, a larger version of Syrinx's, swayed over the floor. The doors behind him opened on a phantom wind, his dismissal clear. But the Oracle said before stalking into the vapors, do yourself a favor, Orion Athalar. Keep well away from Bryce Quinlan. So why would the Oracle tell Hunt to stay away from Bryce if it was clear that Bryce and Hunt together could abolish the Asteri, that Bryce and Hunt are mates? I think there's a couple possibilities here. Possibility number one, the Oracle is nefarious, right? The Oracle is on the Asteri side. To me, that would be odd because Cormac was pushed towards Bryce, which did ultimately end up working against the Asteri, and Rune's prophecy ended up being true as well. But that's possible, right? The Oracle could be working for the Asteri. Possibility number two, which I think is more likely, the Oracle has certain things that it can't see. Right. And other worlds might be one of them, kind of like the Surreal. So it can't see what Bryce might accomplish in Prythian. It might not see that they do end up making it out okay. So maybe the Oracle does see like, yeah, you guys are mates, but like this does not end well for you because I can't actually see you guys winning this in the end because it requires Bryce to go into another world. And the reason we know that the Oracle can't see certain things is in chapter 33 of that first book. It can be healed. Hunt's heart stalled. How? A long, long pause. Then it is veiled. I cannot see. None can see. The Fae legends say it can't be repaired. Those are legends. This is truth. The horn could be repaired. Who wants to do this? He had to ask, even if it was foolish. This too is veiled. So this sounds a lot like the Surreal being unable to see the bone carver because he's from a different world, or Elaine being unable to see things about Koschei, potentially for the same reason, or potentially because Koschei and like other powerful beings, maybe the Asteri, just simply don't want them to. Like simply they just have a way of veiling things. And the horn is from another world. The Asteri are of other worlds. Like they're not from here. So if the Oracle is also susceptible to this sort of veiling, that's totally possible. Weird thing number two, Bryce leaves Hunt in the hands of the Asteri and goes off into another world. She hates it. She's miserable doing it, but she is able to do it. And similar situations have happened, but never ones where a mate actually believes that their mate is likely dead or going to die, which we know that Bryce does. We hear her think it over and over again in Prythian. Other times when a mate leaves someone, right? Feyre fakes the mating bond breaking, and goes back to Spring. This is different, right? Because she's prepared to pretend to be Tamlin's lover. So she and Rhys are under the impression that Tamlin is not going to hurt her. And Rhys is going back to his court where he'll be safe. So they're like, all right, well, we're going to play a controlled game of chess here. But Feyre is going to separate. And even so, like Rhys is going kind of crazy. And then in the case of Nesta and Cassian, right? There's near certain death. And a mate, technically speaking, has an opportunity to try and do something, right? Like Nesta has power. She froze, basically. She was not able to find it, and she chose to lay down on top of Cassian and die with him instead of trying to find it and fight Hybern. So it's a break-in pattern. It's a break-in pattern that Bryce chose to go to another world and say, like, I don't really know whether Hunt's going to live.
Yeah, but Cassian does leave Nesta to complete the blood right on her own. Right. He does, he wants to go in and break her out, but they're like, no, we can't do it because of rules, right? Because of rules and magic. But
they would die.
Yeah, I know. But
the blood right, they would be executed.
Well, if Bryce had stayed, everyone would have been executed too. I think it's a similar scenario. Bryce leaving in that case was the only way to get them out alive in the end.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But I guess in the case of the blood right, I agree with you. I obviously agree with you. But in the case of the blood right, there's a chance of Nesta making it out alive. If Cassian goes to get her, he's dooming them both to death.
In the case of this, there's a chance of Hunt getting out alive. And if Bryce had stayed, Rigelus would have killed them all.
I don't know if Rigelus would have killed them all. Rigelus didn't he make them a deal already?
I don't think he was keeping that deal. But the Asteri would have stayed in power, and they had all agreed that was basically not something they were willing to deal with anymore.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But it is, I still think it's a breaking pattern. All right. Weird thing number 3. I'll call it mating conversation is weird. So Hunt eventually does behave totally like a mate, but there's nothing that snaps into place for them where they know before they start calling themselves that. And everyone is kind of the full immortal being that they are going to be at that time, right? So classically in Sarah J. Maas's, works and ways, right? We're talking ACOTAR here, right? So we have mating bonds that people recognize, basically. So Rhys kind of suspects it when Feyre is human, and then when Feyre is turned Fae, he's like, oh fuck, here it is. All right, gotta go. And then he kind of wrestles with it for a period of time, but one of them can definitely feel it. I know it's contested, right? But Lucien and Elaine can feel it as well. Cassie and Nesta can feel it, can see it. The mating conversation between Hunt and Bryce is had before they are really sure of anything, right? So in House of Sky and Wrath, chapter 27, it goes like this. Boyfriend sounds weird for you. It's so young, but what else is there? If he had a star on his chest, Hunt knew it would be glowing as he asked. Partner? Not sexy enough. Lover? Does that come with a ruff and loot? He swept a wing over her bare thigh. Anyone ever tell you that you're a pain in the ass? Just ye old lover. Hunt hooked his finger around the strap of her thong and snapped it. She yowled, swatting away his hand, but Hunt grabbed her fingers, laying them on his heart again. What about mate? Bryce stilled, and Hunt held his breath, wondering if he'd said the wrong thing. When she didn't reply, he went on. Fae have mates, right? That's the term they use. Mates are an intense thing for the Fae. She swallowed audibly. It's a lifetime commitment, something sworn between bodies and hearts and souls. It's a binding between beings. You say I'm your mate in front of any Fae and it'll mean something big to them. And we don't mean something big like that? He asked carefully, hardly daring to breathe. She held his heart in her hands, had held it since day one. You mean everything to me, she breathed, and he exhaled deeply. But if we tell Rune that we're mates, we're as good as married. To the Fae, we're bound on a biological molecular level. There's no undoing it. Is it a biological thing? It can be. Some Fae claim they know their mates from the moment they meet them, that there's some kind of invisible ink between them, a scent or a soul bond. Is it ever between species? I don't know, she admitted, and ran her fingers over his chest in dizzying, taunting circles. But if you're not my mate, Athalar, no one is. A winning declaration of love. She scanned his face, earnest and open in a way she so rarely was with others. I want you to understand what you're telling people, telling the Fae if you say, I'm your mate. Angels have mates, not as soul magic-y as the Fae, but we call life partners mates in lieu of husbands or wives. Shahar had never called him such a thing. They rarely even use the term lover. The Fae won't differentiate. They'll use their intense-ass definition. He studied her contemplative face. I feel like it fits, like we're already bound on that biological level. Me too. And who knows, maybe we're already mates. It would explain a lot, how intense things had been between them from the start. And once they crossed that last physical barrier, he had a feeling the bond would be even further solidified. So maybe they were already mates by that Fae definition. Maybe Erd had long ago bound their souls, and they needed all this time to realize it. But did it even matter if it was fate or choice to be together? So Hunt totally acts like Bryce's mate. All the way down. He seems to know, he seems to act like it. Even in that same scene, he thinks his mate, his, and he was hers. It wouldn't have surprised him if her name were stamped on his heart. He wondered if his own were stamped on the glowing star in her chest. But it's interesting that we get Hunt in this conversation, right? Not Bryce. And Bryce is the one who seems not uncertain, like she's not uncertain about Hunt, but she does seem like she's not like telling him like, yeah, we have a mating bond right now. Like, I'm so certain that you're my mate. She's like, if we go out and say that we are mates, this is what the Fae are going to think. And who knows, maybe we are already mates. As if it's possible to not kind of have an inclination, which we've just not seen in the Maasverse, right? This is, in my opinion, one of the weirdest things about them.
I would say this is the strongest argument against them being mates, is that we do not have a physical representation of a mating bond between them like we get with Rhys and Feyre. Unless, well, we don't, right? We don't have that tug. There's never there's no tugging. Rhys and Feyre yell things down the bond. There's none of that. We don't get that with Cassian and Nesta either. And there's no doubt in my mind that Cassian and Nesta are mates, even though we don't get like a physical manifestation of it. Cassian says he knew they were mates on Solstice, right? But we don't have that like hug between them that we've seen with other mates in the Maasverse. I would say that's the strongest argument against it. The only thing I would disagree with what you said before is that you said everyone in this scenario is kind of in their full final form. They are, except for the fact that the parasite is also in their blood and in their magic, right? So is it possible that the parasite is somehow interfering with this mating bond? I don't know. That seems a little weak. And the fact that, I don't know how to do this without Throne of Glass spoilers, Hunt is not Fae. Like we've had mated pairs. We have had mated pairs before in the Maasverse between a Fae and a non-Fae, but I don't believe that non-Fae has said that they felt any kind of bond. It's just been the Fae partner, right?
I mean, Fae and Adis are mates in theory.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. And Adis is from hell. So I don't know. And I don't really know that it matters. One of the lines that matters to me a lot in the scene is, but did it even matter if it was fate or choice to be together? To me, this is saying something. And I think it could be saying one of two things. One, it could be Sarah saying, hey, this is not like the mated pairs that you have seen in other books by me. And you should note that, and it's going to matter later. Or it could be saying, hey, like basically exactly that, but it's on purpose. I'm going a different way with this mated pair. And like, it's not a cauldron mated pair or like a Prithian mated pair. And like, this is choice. It's not fate. Because this to me is like a very, this is the most chosen mating we have ever seen. Like no one else really chose. I mean, that sounds really bad. Like everybody obviously chose their mate at the end of the day, but like everybody kind of experienced the pull without necessarily, I don't know, going out of their way to go get it. And they are before actually experiencing anything that even feels like a mating bond saying, maybe we're already mates. Like we want to be. So let's try.
Yeah. And I would even maybe interpret that differently. Like, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe Sarah is saying in this series, like they're mates, but they're not the same type of mates. But maybe she's saying, does it matter? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't matter. Like, as opposed to it does matter later. She might be saying, doesn't matter. They're still in love. They're still endgame, you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. But I do think I see you guys. I understand. I think, but did it even matter if it was fate or choice to be together? If we are asking ourselves the question, are they the same types of mates as Rhys and Feyre are? This conversation to me is seeming like maybe not. Another weird thing, there's no tugging. We already talked about that. Not really a weird thing, but something that gives us pause, gives me pause. And again, it's to me, not necessarily a point against, but like what's going on here. Hunt was made for Bryce, right? Yep. Hell watched. Hell ensured they met. Hell claimed they didn't intend for them to be mates, but there was clearly calculation in their union, right? So we get a running theme early on that there were a lot of beings that were made for Bryce, intended for eventually linking up with Bryce and making sure that she could fulfill her purpose. And we get a couple hints that this wasn't supposed to happen. So in chapter 64 of Crescent City 1, House of Earth and Blood, Bryce says, this wasn't supposed to happen between us. And Hunt says, I know. And he says, but thank God it did. Thank fucking Erd it did, is what he said. And of course, Adis is like, we did not mean to make you mates. Like that, like greater powers went with that. But they made Hunt. And they pushed Hunt towards Bryce. So understood that can raise some flags. Again, not weird, but a sign that Hunt and Bryce might not be forever if Sarah ever sticks to a death. The death connections with Hunt are insane. He is the Umber Mortis. His name means shadow of death. We get Memento Mori for like all of Crescent City, and it's not really delivered on. I mean, it's delivered on in like chapter 6 or whatever with Danica, but we get Memento Mori for the entire series after that, and Orion dies in every mythological recounting of Orion. He's dead. And those are pretty much all of the weird things that give me pause about Hunt and Bryce not being mates. Is there anything you would add before we talk about the case for Hunt and Bryce as mates?
I definitely think there is a case to be made that Hunt and Bryce are not mates, but I mostly get into it within our Throne of Glass section. So the only thing I'll say high level here, and this kind of goes with the bond thing as well. I think there's two things. No, there's really only one that I can do without getting into Throne of Glass spoilers. Hunt, we have had both Rhys die and Feyre die, right? In ACOTAR. And when Feyre dies, Rhys says, obviously this is later, this is Court of Mist and Fury, chapter 54. Rhys says, you'd freed us with your last breath and my power. I wrapped my power around the bond, the mating bond. I could feel you flickering there, holding on. Home. Home had been at the end of the bond. I told the Bone Carver, not Tamlin, not the Spring Court, but Rhysand. Oh, wait, no, sorry. This is totally the wrong. So he's wrapping his power around the mating bond, right? And then he says, but then she snapped your neck, tears rolled down his face, and I felt you die, he whispered. So that is A Court of Mist and Fury, chapter 54. So Rhys feels Feyre die. And then when Rhys dies, Feyre says, the thing that rose and fell with each breath, that echoed each heartbeat, the mating bond, it wasn't there, it was gone because his own chest, it was not moving, and Rhys was dead. So they both felt each other die, again, through this mating bond. And we've talked, Hunt and Bryce don't seem to have a physical mating bond, but they both feel each other die. When Bryce dies at the end of Crescent City 3, we get, and then Bryce was before him, her hair floating like she was underwater, face crusted, frozen, unconscious. The mask said a different word, but he ignored it and reached. Time still so fucking slow. So this is lovely and romantic, and it is clearly Hunt refusing to let Bryce go, right? But it is not the same as, I know that my mate is dead. It is different than that, right? So I mean, I know, I'm going to argue both sides here. Like, I'm not going to let my personal biases get in the way of this. Like, I see what you're saying. It's not the same. Doesn't feel the same as the other mates we get in this series.
And the feeling death piece, I don't want to give too much credence to when Hunt is almost dead because Bryce hadn't made her drop at that point. So I don't really know how that impacts Bryce. But Hunt doesn't feel a mating bond start disappearing when Bryce dies. And I know we've talked a bit about how Rhys and Feyre seem to have a more solid, if you will, mating bond than Cassian and Nesta. But Asriel has said that you would feel if your mate died. And so I don't think that that is necessarily unique to Rhys and Feyre. Now, how does Asriel know that? I don't know. But
yeah, and I have that quote, and I do think it's good to talk about, actually, because we just said that we don't think Cassian and Nesta have that physical bond necessarily, or we haven't gotten it, right? But we get Cassian stared towards the castle. You think she's alive. The question haunted him with every breath these last few days. You'd know if she died, Asriel said, pausing his work and looking up at Cassian. He tapped his brother's chest with a scarred hand. Right here, you'd know, Cass, right? So even though they don't have that physical bond that Rhys and Feyre seem to have, Asriel's still saying, no, you would know if your mate was dead. And Hunt, I mean, I do think Hunt knows, to be fair. Like, I think this scene is just supposed to show his, like, refusal to accept that fact. Like, we get that later when he's like, no prayers, no fucking prayers, right? Like, it's overtly romantic, but he's refusing to accept that she's dead, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't pull the quotes, but we have at least a more physical version for Cassian and Nesta than Bryce and Hunt, right? And that Bryce and Hunt have, I think, one mention that I found of like a link. And for Cassian and Nesta, like chapter 63, he beheld the truth in her eyes on solstice when the mating bond had been like so much gold thread between their souls, but she'd still hesitated. And yesterday his temper had gotten the better of him. So there is acknowledgement of a thread, like a bond between the two of them. And I believe, and I can try to find it in the like final scene between Cassian and Nesta where they commingle and they reconcile after everything, there's something like golden that solidifies between them. So even they have something. It's not a Rhys and Feyre level, but it's something. So yeah,
well,
it seems intentional.
I think what they have is what's mentioned in that scene. In Solstice, there's these like gold threads of power going between them, which if we're going to talk about power being transferred during sex, we just did a whole question about that, right? I don't know if that's because Hunt and Bryce are mates that's what's happening. But cool. That's what I had for against, really. I mean, until we get into Throne of Glass territory.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so the case for Bryce and Hunt as mates. Spoiler, there is a lot more. He had been waiting for her from the moment he'd been born. And this is a thing that's said, right, about mates. Specifically by I'll say it's the men typically, but that's mostly because we've read situations where the men are older. So, like, the men are usually like 500 years old and waiting for their, like, 20-year-old wives, which we'll just leave that there. So in Crescent City 1, chapter 94, Hunt is trying to resuscitate Bryce. We read this last week. And he braced himself, sent another shock of lightning. Oh yeah, he doesn't feel this one either. He doesn't feel or die here either. Hunt braced himself and sent another shock of lightning into her heart. She arced off the ground once more, body lifeless. Come on, he repeated, pumping her chest again with his hands. I'm waiting for you. He'd been waiting for her from the moment he'd been born. And as if she'd heard him, Bryce exploded into life. So, been waiting for her from the moment he'd been born. Bryce's very blood answers to Hunt's. This is another classic mating thing, right? Blood sang for your mates, blood answered to your mates, magic saying for your mates. House of Sky and Breath, Chapter 1, very first chapter. Bryce had developed a keen awareness of Hunt's presence, like scenting lightning on the wind. He had only to enter a room and she'd know if he was there by that surge of power in her body. Her magic, her very blood answered to his. So that's clear, in my opinion. This is, in my opinion, the strongest case, which is kind of saying a lot given we have all the scent shit, but in my opinion, this is still the strongest case. Hunt goes literally insane when Bryce is unsafe, right? Like he goes insane. And we learned this in ACOTAR, right? Like after Rhys and Feyre have their mating moment, which like kudos to Cassian's control because he kind of just like fucks off after he and Nesta mate, if you will. But Rhys needs to like go fight Cassian for a day in order to work off the whole mating temper situation. So Hunt in House of Sky and Breath a few places early in chapter 35, he says like, I get hysterical when your safety is involved. And this is before they have done anything. And then later in chapter 43, this is after Lydia like almost catches them and they escape to the depth charger. Hunt lay beside her, wings dripping wet, lightning still crackling around him. His eyes, holy fuck, his eyes, pure lightning filled them. No whites, no irises, nothing but lightning. It snapped around him, vines wreathing his arms, his brow. Bryce had the vague sense of the others behind him, but she kept her focus on Hunt. And then we switch to Hunt's POV in chapter 46. There was only his power and Bryce. The rest of the world had become an array of threats to her. Hunt had the vague notion of being brought onto an enormous mare ship, of talking with its commander and noticing the people and the Omega boat and Cormac being wheeled off. His mind had drifted, riding some storm without end, his magic screaming to be unleashed. He descended into this plane of existence, of primal savagery, the moment the Hind had disappeared. He knew he had to take her out, if it meant getting Bryce to safety. He had decided that it didn't matter if Dannon or Cormac or Therian got cooked in the process. So he's like, fuck my friends. Like, fuck my friends.
Which Rhys is like, too, right? I mean,
yeah.
Rhys is tearing Cassian apart. Like,
yeah. And then Rune sees how insane he is and straight up calls them mates, right? So Hunt's lightning crackled, his second skin over his body, his soaked clothes. He didn't show any signs of calming down. She had no idea how to calm him down. This was how he was that day with Sandriel, Rune said into his mind. When he ripped off her head, he added tightly, you were in danger then too. And what's that supposed to mean? Why don't you tell me? You seem like you know what the fuck is happening with him. Rune glared at her as Hunt continued to glow and menace. It means that he's going ballistic in the way that only mates can when the other is threatened. It's what happened then, and it's what's happening now. You're true mates the way fate are mates in your bodies and souls. That's what was different about your scent the other day. Your scents have merged, as they do between fae mates. She glared right back at her brother. So what? So find some way to calm him down. Athalar's your fucking problem now. And I'm skipping a bit. Bryce's heart strained. True mates, not only in name, but in the way that fae could be mates with each other. Rune said Athalar was dangerous before, but as a mated male, he's utterly lethal. Bryce countered he was always lethal. Not like this. There's no mercy in him. He's gone lethal in a fae way, in that predatory kill all enemies way. He's an angel. Doesn't seem to matter. One look at Hunt's hard face and she knew Rune was right. Some small part of her thrilled at it that he descended this far into some primal instinct to try to save her. So, I mean, he goes insane and then Rune, a fae, looks at him and is like, that's your mate and your sense have merged and your mates. Before they hook up the first time, Bryce describes what will happen as a bridge between souls, which is classic mating bond language. It's not actually while it's happening, so there is that, but she calls it a bridge between souls. She released him, let him decide whether this was what he wanted, this final bridge between their souls, which is what mates do. Celestina smells their mating bond and change in scent too, right? So when they get back in House of Sky and Breath, chapter 51, Celestina smiled in greeting, a good sign. No hint of Ephraim?
I don't know.
Or the others. Good as well. Her smile widened as Hunt stepped closer. Congratulations, she said warmly. Hunt angled his head. On what? She gestured to him. I take it from your scent that you and Bryce are mated. He hadn't realized the sex would be broadcast like that. Apparently the bond between them had gone to that biological level. Since the overnight at her parents' house. So we get, even though the conversation was atypical, it does seem to have moved to normal mating bond levels with the sense merging, the crazy male rage, the soul merging. And then Hunt also hears music between their souls, which I thought was kind of interesting. His lightning flowed into her like a river, and he could have sworn he heard a beautiful sort of music between their souls. As Bryce said, we need reinforcements. So that's my register of case 4. What else do you have?
I have a lot. I'll just pick and choose. So we know that mates are supposed to be equals. We get this quote. This is from Tamlin in ACOTAR Chapter 19. High Fae mostly marry, he said, his golden skin flushing a bit. But if they're blessed, they'll find their mate, their equal, their match in every way. High Fae wed without the mating bond, but if you find your mate, the bond is so deep that marriage is insignificant in comparison. We get seeds of Bryce and Hunt being equals pretty early on. So this is in Crescent City 1 at chapter 27. Hunt opened his mouth to tell Quinlan that he understood not just the complicated relationship thing, but the loss to wake up one morning surrounded by friends and his lover, and then to end the day with all of them dead. He understood how it gnawed on bones and blood and the very soul of a person, how nothing could ever make it right. And then we get, she looked to the river. This is Crescent City 1 at chapter 60. I never realized it, she murmured, that you and I are mirrors. He hadn't either, but a voice floated back to him. You look how I feel every day, she whispered when she cleaned him up after Micah's latest assignment. Is it a bad thing? So that's really 3 references in one, right? Because she also says after she cleans him up after Micah, you look how I feel every day. We also know, we read this quote last question about when Bryce is coming back to life after the drop, that his power recognizes hers as a mirror, right? So we have a lot of imagery, language around them being equal. We have a lot too of, we have some lines, we just have some overtly like romantic and mate coded lines with them, right? So this is Crescent City 1, chapter 80. This is before they have that conversation, right? Bryce, his friend, and everything they had was more than that. She was his and he was hers. That's a classic mate line, right? And he should have told her that, should have told her in the comitium lobby that she was the only person who mattered, who would ever matter to him. And he'd find her again, even if it took him 1,000 years. He'd find her and do everything Sandriel had mocked him about, right? So this is very, in my mind, this is similar to Rhys saying to Feyre, I waited for you for 500 years. And even if this was all the time we had together, it was worth it. Hunt is saying he'd find her again, even if it took him 1,000 years, right? I think those are pretty similar. After Bryce wakes up at Hunt's arms after saving the city, we get, he hadn't cared that an entire city was looking on. He'd wanted to kiss her when the light of her power had faded, when Hunt had lowered his wings to find her in his arms, looking up at him like he was worth something, like he was all she needed. End of story. No one had ever looked at him like that. This to me is very Cassian and Nesta, right? This sounds a lot like the way that Nesta describes the way that Cassian looks at her, makes her feel. It's very reminiscent of that relationship to me. You talked about the possessiveness. He also does it to Ethan, right? And it's a biological level thing, right? So when Ethan is bunking with them and Bryce says, oh, Ethan will sleep in my bed, we get his bed, his blood roared, right? So it's his blood, his biological level, his blood is roaring. Even if he hadn't been near it in months, his bed, his Bryce, who'd emerged from that bathroom in her sleep shorts and a faded threadbare t-shirt that did nothing to hide the shadow of her nipples behind the purple fabric, right? So on a biological level, his blood is saying, get the fuck away from her, right? And then we get, allow me to repeat what I said to you last night. You bring trouble in here to Bryce and I will fucking gut you. Ethan's mouth twitched upwards. I'm shaking, Athalar. Hunt didn't smile back. Are you suddenly cool with her because she's a princess, because of the horn and the starborn shit? Ethan's nose crinkled with the beginnings of a snarl. I don't care about any of that. Then why the fuck did you bother to defend her in that article? You had to know there'd be consequences with Sabine. You practically called Sabine out. Danica showed up for her. My brother and the rest of the pack of devils showed up for her this spring. If they're not holding a grudge, then how can I? So he's saying, I will fucking kill you if you bring trouble to her doorstep, right? Like that's very mate possessiveness, etc. We get a lot of classic mate lines. So this is Crescent City 2, chapter 17. He always got her like that. They didn't need Rune's fancy mind speaking to communicate. So this is kind of, they just get each other. They understand each other. There is later a scene where they're having sex, and hold on, let me get it. So this is Bryce and Hunt having sex, possibly in that Avallen scene. Bryce is thinking to herself, husband, Prince Hunt, Yes, Hunt said, and she must have voiced her thoughts aloud because his thrust turned deeper, harder. I fucking love you, Bryce. So that is a moment where she thinks this and he hears her thinking it. Whether that's because she's a secret Daemati or because this is part of the mating bond, we don't know. But that is like a biological connection here that we could potentially have. We get she was his and he was hers, utterly fucking hers. That's Crescent City 2, chapter 17. We have I see you too, Athalar. That's Crescent City 2, chapter 35. I see you is a big mate line, right? Cassie and Anastasia say that to each other a lot. Hunt also says that Bryce smells like home. So we have it smelled like paradise. This is when he falls asleep in her lap and wakes up. It smelled like paradise, like home and eternity, and like exactly where he was meant to be. It's pretty much as matey as you can get, right? Hunt opened his eyes to feminine softness and warmth and gentle breathing. In the dim light, he found himself half sprawled across Bryce's lap. The woman herself passed out against the headboard, head lolling to the side. Her hand still lingered in his hair, the other in the sheets by his arm. We have, I never stopped wanting it, wanting you. I thought it was obvious. Rune wasn't entirely sure what to do with himself as the angel crossed the room and knelt before Bryce, grabbing her hands. I want a future with you. That's why I'm going. I'm going to fight for that future. Her sister's eyes softened. Hunt kissed her hands. And to do so, we can't play by other people's rules. That's Crescent City 2, chapter 68. Bryce was the entirety of his world, his mate, his wife, his princess. That's Crescent City 3, chapter 4. Prince Hunt Athalar Danon. He would have hated that last name were it not for the fact that it was a marker of her ownership over his soul, his heart. He'd stay here, let Pollux rip him to shreds, cut through his wings again and again, if it meant that the Asteri's attention stayed away from her, if it brought her time to rally the force to take on those fuckers. So all of that is Crescent City 3 when he's in the Asteri dungeon. Just very Revenant, very like I am hers and she is mine language, right? And then his voice is also what brings her back from the drop, right? So he says, I'm waiting for you. He'd been waiting for her from the moment he'd been born. And as if she'd heard him, Bryce exploded into life, right? So her saying, I'm waiting for you. Him saying, I'm waiting for you is what brings her back to life. You talked about their sense merging. You talked about the rage days. This one's really big, actually, and I don't think we talked about it. She teleports directly to him, even though she has no idea where he is, and it's farther than she's ever teleported before. She teleports directly to him. So we know that mates can open portals directly to each other because of Thea and Adis. So we've read this quote like 100 times now, but I was never privy to the story of how my mother and Prince Adis became lovers. I know only that even in the midst of war, I had never seen my mother so at peace. She told me once when I marveled at our luck that the portal had opened to Adis that day, it was because they were mates. Their souls had found each other across galaxies, linking them that fateful day as if the mating bond between them was indeed some physical thing, right? So this is interesting too, because Selene, who has a mate, is not saying that her mating bond is a physical thing here. And she is saying as if Thea and Adis's mating bond is a physical thing. So we have a physical manifestation of a mating bond in ACOTAR, but it does not seem like Selene registers a mating bond as a physical thing. That's just an interesting thing that I just notice. We know that typically Bryce can only teleport to places that she has been before. Cormac tells her, you can go that far. It's that precise. I need to know the spot. If it's a trickier location, indoors, or a specific room, I need exact coordinates. Cormac said, my accuracy is within 2 feet. We also know that in Crescent City 2, Sophie says that Cormac won't be able to get to her because he doesn't know where she is. The quote for that is, Silver couldn't use his power to get her. He had no idea where she was, right? So we know that to teleport, you need to know exactly where you're going. When Bryce gets back to Midgard, she teleports right to Hunt on the depth charger. She does not know where he is. She has never been on the depth charger before. Like, this is truly a complete leap of faith. And the quote we have for that is, with a parting middle finger to the floor at her feet and the Autumn King sulking beneath it, she teleported out of the villa to the place she wanted to be the most, home, wherever that was in Midgard, because her home was no longer just a physical place, but a person too. Selene had claimed as much when she spoke of Thea and Adis. Their souls had found each other across worlds because they were mates. They were each other's homes, and for Bryce, home was and always would be Hunt. That's Crescent City 3, chapter 39. So I think when you take together the pieces. Their scents merge, their scents change, right? Bryce teleports directly to Hunt. Hunt goes into the rage days, and we have all of the traditional language that we get around mates, without lack of a better word. Like we have the I was his and he was mine. I would wait for you for 1,000 years. I see you. Like these are all phrases we get around mates. That is really in the pro mate direction. And the thing that does not work, if we're keeping it solely Crescent City and ACOTAR, is that lack of physical manifestation of the bond and how that plays out also when Bryce dies, right? So like, I think there's things on both sides here. I think there's pros and there's cons. Yeah. I'm in the pro camp. I think Sarah has done enough to convince me that they are mates, even without the physical bond. You don't have to be in the pro camp. That's okay. But I'm in the pro camp. But
are you talking to me or are you talking to listeners?
Listeners.
Yeah. I think I actually think there can be, in my opinion, there can be quite a bit of nuance here. And I think we'll get into it. I want to call out, because I know there's a popular citation that the Bryceriel Reddit, I think, calls out, which is after the rune scent merging call out, Ethan smells 2 scents when Bryce and Hunt land. So acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. I hear that. And I don't actually know whether scents merging means that you
it doesn't
smell 1 scent or you still smell 2 scents of people. It's just a kind of merged scent.
No, it doesn't, because we get favorite. So we know that Reese's scent is citrus and salt, right? That is said many, many times throughout ACOTAR. In a Court of Frost and Starlight, we get Feyre's scent in chapter 11 from Reese, and it is lilac and pear, right? So it is not citrus and salt. I don't think when scents merge, it literally means that they become one person, like that it becomes one person that you can scent. I think you still keep 2 distinct scents, even though you are now merged, basically. It's not great writing. Like, I'll agree it's not great writing. But, and I know I said that I thought the Autumn King and Ember were mates because they have a similar scent. I think it's not consistent. Like, I think it's just not consistent. Yeah.
Yep. There's a minor call out from Reddit on the Hunt rage days, which is that he specifically doesn't give a fuck whether the people Bryce loves lives or dies, whereas Reese exercises a lot of self-control. Cassian is also able to exercise a lot of self-control when Nesta is in danger by not pulling her out of the blood right and sentencing them both to death. And I understand that. I actually just think that there's a couple things going on here. 1, Reese is 550 years old, and so is Cassian. And then 2, Hunt's just a hothead.
Well, hairpin trigger or hairpin temper. No, I thought. Temper. Thank you. I thought a lot about this one. I do think there's a big difference here. And that difference manifests itself as the series continues. At this point in the story, Bryce's only power is having 1/3 of Thea's starlight, and she can teleport, but only when she's charged up, right? So even though she's very good with weapons, at this point in the story, she is not any kind of super powerful fae. She gets there eventually, right? She claims the other portions of Thea's stars. She trains, she gets more powerful. But basically her only power at this point in the story is being able to blind people, and she can wield weapons and fight really well, but they're in the middle of the ocean. That's not really going to help her, right? So I do think there is a difference between Feyre, who has the power of every High Lord, Nesta, who stole power from the cauldron and later becomes a Valkyrie, right? And Bryce at this point in the story. And there is a contrast later in a later scene in Avallen when Bryce is wielding, she now has 2/3. She now has 2/3 of the star, or maybe she has all 3 pieces of the star. I don't remember exactly when it happens, but it's around that point where Bryce is fighting off Morven and the Autumn King. And Baxian says to Hunt, aren't you going to help her? Because she's facing death, right? She's facing an incredible battle. And Hunt says, she doesn't need my help. She's good. She doesn't need my help. I don't need to help her, right? So I think it's Hunt kind of recognizing that as Bryce's power grows, at first he needs to be in that protector role because she isn't as strong as everyone else. That's a big piece of Crescent City 1, right? That she doesn't have a lot of power. And at this point in Crescent City 2, she hasn't really claimed more power, but by the time we get to almost the end of Crescent City 3, Hunt is saying, I don't need to worry about her anymore. She's good. She can fight on her own. She's got power. I'm not as needed here as I was before.
I actually think in thinking about it for the last 20 seconds, my view on this is actually that your emotional maturity, in my opinion, is not really coupled with being a mate versus not. Like, I do genuinely think that Hunt is less emotionally mature than both Rhys and Cassian. I just think that he is. Like, he's younger, he's less mature. He and Bryce get into little shit fights. I think that he grows a lot over the course of the book, but I don't really think that has any bearing necessarily. I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I just think it is not relevant.
To your point, slave for 200 years. Slave for 200 years, right? Hunt has not really been able to have a life or like mature for like 200 years. Like he's in a completely different situation than Rhys and Cassian, who have been allowed to have like pretty normal lives. They've fought in some wars for sure, but like Hunt has literally been a slave for 200 years. And I think that will always impact you, especially if your mate, I'm going to say mate, is about to suffer the same fate that you have been suffering for 200 years, right?
Well, I think Rhys and Cassian, normal life, but also like Rhys has been a high lord and Cassian has been leading his armies. So like they've actually had to mature. I know that Hunt was a general, but then he was a slave, for 200 years. So I just don't think that their maturity is comparable.
Yeah, and Hunt runs from power, right? People keep trying to bow to him and Hunt keeps saying, no, thank you. I do not want this. I do not want to lead again. I'm not interested. So I do agree with you on the emotional maturity part a bit. Not that I think being a leader means you're emotional mature. I think there's amazing individual contributors who are emotionally mature, but just fitting into that pattern.
Well, I do think that being a good leader means that you are emotionally mature, though.
Yeah.
I think you can not be a leader and be emotionally mature. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
To be a leader, you have to be. All right, cool. All right, anything else on Bryce and Hunt and mates?
Not without the full Maasverse.
Okay, so with that, we are now going to begin talking about Throne of Glass spoilers. So if you have not read all 8 published books in Throne of Glass, those are all the books, because Throne of Glass, as far as we know, is completed, and you don't want to be spoiled, we suggest you leave. If you want to find us on social media, we're on all of them, Dragons in the Details Pod on all of them. And thanks for coming. All right, Throne of Glass spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Abby, do you have any Throne of Glass COSMS or COSMS?
I mean, no, I just had a continuation of this question, basically.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Yes. All right, Abby, are Hunt and Bryce really mates? Lyria / full Maasverse precedents included.
Okay. So I didn't actually talk about Lyria. So I'm happy for you to talk about Lyria if you want to. Or did I?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I will.
I did.
Like, really? You didn't talk about Lyria at all?
Sorry, she was like a sub bullet. So we talked about the lack of physical manifestation of the bond. I think when you look at it from a Rhys and Feyre lens, that doesn't look great. But when you look at it from a Rowan and Aelin lens, on top of that, it really doesn't look great, because the physical manifestation of the bond between Rowan and Aelin, who are not Daemati, right? There's a lot of talk about like, oh, but Rhys and Feyre are Daemati. Rowan and Aelin are not Daemati. So the bond between them is a much kind of bigger thing. So let's kind of just talk about the bond between Rowan and Aelin. This is Kingdom of Ash Chapter 2. Luck had indeed run thin these days. They'd had little since that blasted beach in Elwë, when Rowan had felt a tug on the bond between him and Aelin, the mating bond, and followed its call across the ocean. So Rowan literally is following the mating bond across the ocean, right? That's how strong this physical tug is. Now, interestingly, Bryce does teleport to Hunt across an ocean. So maybe it is the same thing. We're just not getting the same language around it, but he's literally feeling that physical tug. Kingdom of Ash Chapter 2, the mating bond remained stretched taut, but it remained. It had been her, it had been Aelin, the silent call of the mating bond driving him even when he could not feel it. We also know, I don't remember, Empire of Storms, I think. We also know that Aelin can feel when Rowan is injured through the bond. So we get, I didn't feel you get this wound through the mating bond, she said, grazing the thick ridge of a new scar, a trophy from the battle. She made herself meet his piercing stare. Did Maeve somehow break that part of it, that part of us? No, he breathed and stroked the hair from her brow. I've realized the bond only conveys the pain of the gravest wounds. So, sorry, that was from Kingdom of Ash. But I think this is another interesting point, right? The reason that Aelin knows why she and Rowan are mates is because she felt him get shot by an arrow, right? She feels him get shot by an arrow. She feels it like it's her own pain. And that's the moment she knows that her and Rowan are mates. Hunt is being tortured the entire time that Bryce is in Prythian. She's a world away. She's a world away for sure. But Bryce doesn't feel it at all. Bryce feels nothing.
And he's injured plenty when they're in the same world, and she doesn't feel it. So
yeah, he gets his wings cut off. She doesn't feel it. Yes, that's fair. So Rowan and Aelin can also sense each other during battle. We get Rowan was safe. The mating bond told her enough. No mortal wounds. And through the blood oath, she knew Fenris and Lorcan still breathed. Whether she could say that for the rest of her friends, she didn't know, didn't want to know, not yet. So Aelin knows that Rowan is alive because of the mating bond. We have Hunt and Bryce in a battle. We don't have anything like that. And we even have a moment in the Bone Corridor where when Bryce is leaving Hunt, right? Not great. Bryce is leaving Hunt. She does go back for him. And to be fair, Nesta also leaves Cassian in the prison and then goes back for him, right? Bryce is leaving Hunt. And she says, like, is Hunt dead? Would a mate know? So she doesn't know. She doesn't know if Hunt is dead or alive, right? So she does go back and they save each other, basically, right? But Aelin is saying, I would know. I would know if Rowan was dead. And Bryce is saying, I don't know if I would know. We know, we talked about recent favor. We talked about Elaine and Lucian. Here's why I don't think the mating bond, well, this isn't great logic. We do know that the mating bond, the physical manifestation of the mating bond can be faked, right? So we get, this is from Rowan. He'd come to love Lyria. That had been true. And the guilt of it ate him alive whenever he thought of it. But he could understand now why Lyria had been so frightened of him for those initial months, why it had been so damn hard to court her, even with that mating bond. Is truth unknown to Lyria as well, right? So Rowan felt the mating bond he felt the bond with Lyria, even though that wasn't real. But with Hunt and Bryce, we don't really get a bond.
On Lyria, I think there's a couple of things, right? So one is akin to what you just said. So Maeve says, right, it was so easy to tug on the right psychic thread that day Rowan saw Lyria at the market, to shove him down that other path, to trick those instincts, a slight altering of fate. So mating bonds can be faked 1000%. Yes, that's possible. But because the bond between Hunt and Bryce didn't really come into fruition until after they had already decided to be mates, or like what seems to be a bond between them, right? Like the Hunt going crazy and the mating patterns didn't exist until later. I think one of two things would have to be true. One, it's not fake. It's just different, or it's like not really the same type of mating bond at all, which is totally fine. Or, and this would be fucked, the Princes of Hell saw things kind of rolling this way, and we think that they're Daemati, and they pulled a similar thread, because we don't know the extent of what this mating bond looked like in real life, right? We're only told after the fact what it looked like. We did not experience it alongside Rowan. We did not experience it alongside Lyria. We were just told afterwards by Maeve, hey, I pulled a psychic thread and this happened. So we have no idea how real it was. We don't know any of the patterns that were associated with it. We just don't know. So it's really hard to compare and say like, hey, this feels real versus it doesn't. Rowan's a pretty smart cookie, so I assume it was decently authentic. And he was confused enough by Aelin's presence that he didn't really believe that Aelin could have been until it was like shoved into his face. But the way that Hunt and Bryce don't have a physical bond right now feels like if this Daemati situation is a physical bond, that's not what's happening here. Or if it's not, if it's more of like tricked instincts, then the Princes of Hell would have had to have started it after Bryce and Hunt already decided, like, this is what I want to do, if it's fake. You know what I mean? Because they had that conversation before any of that was really like rolling.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, to play devil's advocate here, though, if we spent the top of this episode talking about the crazy things that happen when Hunt and Bryce combine powers, right? So if everything the Princes of Hell have told us is a lie, right? If their plan was not to get Hunt or not to get Bryce to open the Northern Rift, but to actually get whatever occurs when Hunt and Bryce have sex, to get that to happen. Mm-hmm. And if that would be why they, again, not a physical mating bond, but basically directed Bryce and Hunt together, I could see that. I could see that being an argument for a fake mating bond here. And I think that would be an interesting story, but it would be retconning so much of what we've already been told, but I'm not going to say she hasn't done that. Like, she told us Maeve wasn't Valg, and then Maeve was Valg. Brandon told us Maeve wasn't Valg, and then Maeve was Valg, right? Like, I think that would be interesting, but I also think based on what we've gotten thus far, it would be kind of it would kind of be similar to what we've gotten already, right? Like, yes, we were made to be together. We were pointed in the direction of being together, but I still love you regardless of that, right? Like, I don't think that would like break them up because we've basically already gotten it. We've basically already gotten it with the Princes of Hell, right? Where like, yeah, we made Hunt for you, but your love exists outside of that, right? Yeah. I also have a little bit on Karanam. Karanam? How do we say that word?
I say Karanam. I don't know.
Karanam.
Right.
All right. So what we know about Karanam, we might as well be wrong together. It's hard to explain, Rowan went on. I've only ever seen it used a handful of times on killing fields. When you're drained, your Karanam can yield their power to you as long as you're compatible and actively sharing a blood connection. She tilted her head to the side. If we were Karanam and I gave you my power, would you still only be using wind and ice, not my fire? He nodded gravely. How do you know if you're compatible with someone? No way of telling until you try. And the bond is so rare that the majority of Fae never meet someone who is compatible or who they trust enough to test it out. There's always a threat that they could take too much. If they're unskilled, they could shatter your mind or you could both burn out completely. So I see the thread. I see the seeds of this with what obviously with Hunt and Bryce are doing. Like she obviously takes his power. He takes her power too, though, as we talked about at the top of the episode. And she just kind of takes everyone's power, right? She takes Asriel, she takes Hypaxia, she takes all the power from the gate. She can really absorb any power.
Exchanging
and they're
blood.
they're not bleeding. They're not bleeding.
No blood.
No blood. And yes, Rowan specifically says sharing a blood connection. So I don't think sex counts as a substitute for that. The way that Aelin describes being Karanam with Rowan is also different. She basically describes it like she is using him as a well of power. So the quote we have for that is, drawing power from the endless well within Rowan, she pulled up fire and light, embers and warmth, the glow of 1,000 dawns and sunsets. If the Val craved the sunshine of Aurelia, then she would give it to them, right? So she is like going into Rowan's power and like pulling it up for herself. Very different imagery than what we get with Hunt, which is always kind of he's charging her up, right? She is receiving and he is giving, as opposed to her going in and taking his power, which it might not be a distinction that matters, but it's just they're kind of written about differently, in my opinion.
Yeah. I do not think, based on what we have read about Bryce and Hunt, that they are Karanam. It does not.
No, I mean,
does not read the same to me.
Yeah. And it might be a distinction without a difference because obviously they can share power. So maybe it doesn't really matter. But yeah.
It's also, I think, fair to say like maybe they would be, though I don't know, because like only Hunt is the only one with like replenishable power here.
Yeah.
Well, no, because Bryce now has Starfire. So I don't know. I bet you if they did cut their hands and hold them, they would exchange some form of power. I just don't know whether it would be in the same mechanism where they're like drawing from each other's well.
Yeah.
It just seems like different concepts.
Yeah, I agree. Similar, but different, I would say.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Last question. Let's get into the Bryceriel of it all. Ronnie.
Okay. All right. So let's dissect what could be true of Bryce and Asriel here, because I do think there's some really interesting stuff. And I tried to pick things out of what I've heard of the Bryceriel community, but also like really just rooted in what I actually think is true, or like what I gravitated towards in my own research. And then if there's anything that we collectively missed in the like Reddit posts and all of that, we can pick them out. So I want to start by talking about, I'll just start. All right. So I think there's a couple possibilities of reasons that Bryce and Asriel have been purposefully brought together, because I do think that they have been purposefully brought together. I do subscribe to that. One theory is one that we've already talked about, but I want to talk about it again, and I want to add a little bit more to it. And then the second is another theory that I have that Abby sent me a Reddit post on that has some additional detail. So I've kind of merged those together and we'll see how it goes. So here's possibility number one, which we have already discussed, right? So we have been told by Apollyon himself that there are others like Hunt, right? So in House of Sky and Breath, chapter 21, Apollyon says, both of you would benefit from training. Your powers are more similar than you realize. Conduits, both of you. You have no idea how valuable you and others like you are. So we know, of course, that Apollyon made Hunt and gave him a power of his, specifically made Hunt, gave him Hellfire with the intent of charging up Bryce. Hunt was a plan for Bryce on Midgard, and we know that Hell set up other plans in case Hunt didn't work out. Thunderbirds and others, right? So in House of Flame and Shadow chapter 61, my brothers and I had doubts about Helena's plans. We continued to rest our hopes on reopening the Northern Rift so that we could continue to fight the fight against the Asteri. If someone like you, a World Walker, did come along and Avallen was somehow not accessible for you to claim Thea's power, we still needed a way to fuel you up, as it were. He faced Hunt at last. Hunt could barely breathe. Here, after all this waiting, here were the answers. You are the son of my two brothers only in the vaguest sense, Ada said. Something in Hunt's chest eased, even as his stomach roiled. Thanatos refused to help at first, Apollyon added, glaring at his brother. I did not approve of the plan, Thanatos snapped, gripping his helmet tight. I still do not. My brother, Ada said, nodding to Thanatos, has long excelled at crafting things. Funny, Bryce said, I didn't take you for a quilter. Hunt gave her an incredulous look, but Ada smiled before he said to Hunt, during the first wars, as you call them, Thanatos helped Apollyon breed new types of demons to fight on our side. The Crystallos designed to hunt for the horn, so we might find a way to into Midgard unobstructed. The Shepherd, the Deathstalkers, a nod to Hunt like he knew of the scar down Hunt's back from one of them. They were but a few of my brother's creations, Bryce shook her head. But the Crystallos' venom can negate magic. I'm sorry, Hunt interrupted, but are you implying that I was made by you two assholes as some sort of pet? He pointed to Thanatos, then to Apollyon. Not a pet, Apollyon said darkly, a weapon. He nodded to Bryce. For her, whenever she might come along. But you didn't know the timelines would overlap, Bryce said a bit breathlessly. No, there were previous experiments, Apollyon said. We hoped they would spread and multiply throughout Midgard, but the Asteri caught wind of our plan and removed them. The Thunderbirds, Bryce said, gaping. You guys made them too? We did, Ada said matter-of-factly, and sent them through the cracks in the Northern Rift. But they were hunted to near extinction generations ago. Blessing an angel with their power, a perfect soldier, it was a gift of poisoned honey. So a couple interesting things there, right? Hell did not know that Bryce and Hunt's timelines would overlap. They created other plans, the Thunderbirds, but they just said other plans, right? Bryce said, the Thunderbirds, did you make them? They said yes. They hoped that they would spread and multiply throughout Midgard. And we have also talked about, right, this is a little bit out there, but we've talked about the fact that Azrael's shadows are more like Cormac's than Rhys's, right? Like specifically they dance around a little bit more like Cormac's. So we've talked about the possibility. And Azrael, of course, charges Bryce up to get back to Midgard, and it works really fucking well. His power feels like pure, undiluted liquor, and Bryce is like, holy shit, even Hunt's doesn't feel this way. Azrael charges Bryce up even better. Now, he doesn't have a parasite, but it seems like even if he had a parasite, it'd be like equal to Hunt, right? So we think it's possible that Azrael is like a Prythian iteration of a plan for Bryce as well. Maybe it was from a Midgardian line. I don't know, but he's on Prythian. My favorite bonus to this theory, Apollyon has Hellfire and Storms, and he also has shadow powers, right? And Hunt has Hellfire, and Azrael has shadows and is an Illyrian. So they both have these like Apollyon-derived powers. So I think there's a possibility, right, that Azrael is an version, right, of what Hunt was meant to be on Midgard, on Prythian, right? So Azrael could be to Bryce what Hunt was meant to be to Bryce on Midgard. And I don't know that necessarily means that they have to be mates, right? Like they might not have to be mates. Might they have been if Bryce like grew up on Prythian? Potentially, right? I think it's possible and thought-provoking to think about whether there might be a cauldron mate. Like we've talked about, right? Like there's an Asteri warped cauldron on Prythian, and like the Asteri are particularly interested in breeding. Could there be the possibility of a Prythian mate and a Midgard mate, or a cauldron mate, and then this like mate of choice that Bryce has chosen? Or just multiple perfect matches, right, for Bryce because of all of the manipulation surrounding her power. We have not seen the effects of a psychic twist again on the mating bond live. So I acknowledge that the beginnings of Hunt's and Bryce's mating feel odd enough that it almost feels like Hunt could be a mate imitation in some ways. But regardless, I do not think that this needs to be a mating situation, but I think Azrael could have been made for Bryce. We've talked about this before. Anything you would add to that before we talk about possibility number 2? Before we talk about possibility number 2, actually, I will say, before we get into it, one of the things that irked me about this research is, and this is not a knock to Sarah or to anybody who supports Bryceriel, but all of the tension, quote tension, that I think a lot of people have latched on to, at least the tension that I see, like the Azrael like promising pain and like touching Bryce's hands, like in the book, to me, in the core book, it all seems pretty chaste. to me, to be honest. But in the Walmart bonus chapter, I actually see a lot, to be honest. Not a lot, but like I see more. Like I actually do see a good amount. So I don't know if you went into the Walmart bonus chapter, but I have a few quotes that I wanted to read before we get into possibility number 2. There is a House of Flame and Shadow Walmart bonus chapter where Azriel, Nesta, and Bryce are in the caves. And this is just basically more like palling around content where Azriel, Nesta, and Bryce are talking more and like they play with Bryce's phone, basically, is the crux of the scenes. But Azriel, the scene starts effectively with Azriel staring at Bryce while she's sleeping. Right. So Azriel was staring right at Bryce. She started whacking her head against the rock. White pain splintered across her vision. By the time it cleared, Nesta was awake. I'm skipping a bit. Nesta says, "What is it?" And then I'll skip a bit. "Nothing, just your usual predator in the night warrior staring at me while I sleep." "You weren't sleeping," Azriel said, faint amusement in his voice. "How do you know?" Bryce countered, but her lips quirked upward. Nesta yawned, stretching her arms over her head and rolling her neck from side to side. "It's his job to be vigilant." She lowered her arms, frowning slightly at Azriel. "Were you really watching her sleep?" Azriel glowered. When you say it like that, it sounds unsavory. It's creepy," Bryce grumbled. So, okay. Azriel is watching her sleep. He's a spy, so checks out. But he was watching her sleep, specifically just staring at her. And then Bryce plays music, and Azriel ends up loving her absolute favorite one. So one of the things that they do in this scene is Bryce is like showing them how her phone works, and Nesta loves music, right? So Bryce plays music out loud, and Nesta's like very excited by that. And Bryce plays a song called Stone Mother. So Stone Mother began playing, its rolling, thumping drums offsetting the wild yet mellow guitars. And then Josie's voice filled the tunnel, sharp and yet soaring, accented by Laurel's sweet, clear backups. The sound was foreign, earthy, haunting. In the span of a few notes, Bryce was back in her childhood bedroom in Nadarov's, sprawled on the carpet, letting the sound of the music run over her for the first time. Then she was in the dry hills of Valbara, surrounded by olive trees, then the palm-lined quay along the Istros, then with Danica, then alone, then with Hunt. This song had carried her through it all, through the years of pain and emptiness and rebuilding. It had carried her from light into darkness and then back into the light. The wrath-like harmonies echoed off the stones. And then the song concludes, the scene concludes, and then at the end, with each mile onward, she could hear Azriel humming softly to himself. The rolling wild melody of Stone Mother flowed off his lips, and she could have sworn even the shadows danced at the sound. So she played a bunch of songs in between then. Azriel chose to hum at the conclusion of that scene, Stone Mother, which is an important song to Bryce. I think people also gravitate towards this particular receipt because he won't sing for Gwen, right? Gwen is like, "You want to sing? You sing? Shadow singer?" He's like, "Not like that." But he does kind of like hum along in seemingly comfortable company with Bryce and Nesta. Bryce notes that Azriel would get along with Rune and his friends. She says he'd probably get along with Rune and his idiot friends. Bryce does ask if Azriel has a mate or anything like it. She kind of pushes a bit, and he says no quickly and flatly. And she kind of flirts with him. Like she kind of does. Like here it is. Okay. I'm curious what you think of this. So Bryce asked Nesta, "You have a mate, right?" She nodded to Azriel. "Do you?" "No," Azriel said quickly, flatly. "A partner or spouse?" "No," Bryce sighed. "Okay then." Azriel's wings twitched. "You're incurably nosy." "I think that's the nicest thing you've said about me." Bryce winked at him. "Look, I'm just curious. Aren't you?" Azriel didn't answer, but Nesta said, "Yes, we are." And then later, they're kind of talking about like what Azriel and Nesta's roles are, like how they are kind of like people who catch bad guys, effectively. "Yes," Azriel said softly, "but this is also the part where I tell you that we're the ones who usually try to find a way to stop those wicked people." "Isn't that a little revealing?" Bryce teased. "You're supposed to maintain the image of the big bad assholes, not tell me you're a bunch of crime-fighting do-gooders." "You can do good," Azriel warned, while still being bad. Bryce whistled. "I know a number of males back home who could only dream of delivering that sentence with such cool." Nesta chuckled. "I know a good number too." Azriel threw Nesta an incredulous look. So they are bantering. So
it's flirty.
It's far more than we get in the text, which is why I'm kind of like irked. I'm like, okay, well, I never would have picked any of this up, and I'm not sure that it matters because it's not in the core text, but I don't know.
I'm getting very sick of Sarah writing these Azriel bonus chapters that just turn everything in the fucking core book like completely on its head. It's very annoying. Yeah, it's frankly annoying.
Elaine.
Yes. Yeah. Wingreal is because of a bonus chapter. Like,
yeah. So with that, Possibility number 2, and this is a little off the wall, so we'll put it in Pre-Cog territory. The prophecy, the knife and the sword prophecy, and romanticism around it is about Bryce and Azriel, and it comes back to the Oracle. I know we said we don't like the Oracle, so like maybe bear with me for a little bit.
I don't like her. You can feel how you want about her.
I don't have to like her to believe what she says. So, but the Oracle didn't say this, right? So when knife and sword are reunited, so shall our people be. So Bryce and Adis first met at the Oracle, right? So the Oracle was someone that Adis spent time around, maybe. That was where he found Bryce, right? So afterward, when I was crying my little heart out on one of the park benches outside the temple, this white cat peered next to me. It had the most unnatural blue eyes, whatever. Adis asks what blinds an Oracle. That's when they met. We are told by Adis that Helena planted this prophecy, right? So this prophecy is supposed to be not real. In House of Flame and Shadow, chapter 60. So why the prophecy about the sword and the knife? Hunt asked. If Thea was so scared of them being reunited, why all this crap about trying to get them back together? Adis crossed his legs. Helena planted that prophecy, seeded it in Fae lore. She knew that despite her mother's fears, the sword and the knife are needed to destroy the Asteri. She knew that if a scion came along who could claim all 3 pieces of magic, they'd need the sword and the knife to make that power count. But my theory here is, what if Helena didn't plant that prophecy? We know that from Nesta's death power and from Apollyon that there is in fact another way to kill the Asteri, right? Like Thea's power when whole is the only thing that can unite and activate the true power of those blades and stop the Asteri's tyranny. Helena knows that Apollyon exists. Helena knows that Apollyon ate Sirius. Like, I don't really understand why the sword and the knife was so critical, unless Hell did, like, really fuck her over, which that's totally possible. But this is loose. So this is loose, but go with me. So there was a prophecy potentially said cryptically, like everything else about the Oracle, to Helena or to someone else in the Starborn line that the knife and sword would reunite people. Would actually reunite people. Like this was actually needed to bring the people back. Bryce runs through a portal between realms, holding the sword, and ends up at Azriel's feet, right? The entire concept of Duskcourt is where light meets dark. Like dusk is the sun setting. But Bryce only has light. Like specifically, she only has light. Celine and Helena both have light and dark. But for whatever reason, when Bryce gets, light and shadows. For whatever reason, when Bryce, even when she collects the whole star, and Thea specifically, right? This is kind of why. Thea only had light. Bryce only has light. She doesn't have shadows like Celine and Helena did. Azriel does have shadows, right? What?
If ACOTAR 6 is called a court of light and shadows, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. That's all.
I would take a court of light and shadows, to be clear. I would take it. Azriel has the shadows, right? It is kind of like if you take Bryce and Azriel, who literally were pulled together across worlds because they are holding these two, the knife and the sword, right? But they are pulled together across worlds. It's kind of like it's like 2 halves of Duskcourt magic have been divided. Celine and Helena's magic have almost been like halved in the 2 of them. Yeah. And Azriel has half of it. And we get support, right? This isn't like completely baseless. We get support that Azriel might have Duskcourt magic in that he feels the Star Sword and Truth Teller. He's been wielding Truth Teller for centuries. And Bryce even thinks like, he probably has Starborn magic too, which is dusk magic.
The prison sentries know what he is.
The prison sentries know what he is. And he also just says like, I'll go to the prison, which always struck me as odd. I'm like, doesn't Reese need to take you and let you in? I don't know. We clearly have questions about who the prison opens for. And then again, this doesn't really need to come into play here for this to be true, but we do get that infamous line, right? While Bryce is in Prithian. Is it possible, Ada said to his brother, ignoring Hunt entirely, after everything, don't fall into romanticism, Apollyon cautioned. The star might have guided her, Adis countered. Adis was probably just talking about the fact that his dead mate's star was guiding Bryce to her home. But like, why is that romantic? Like, why is it romantic that Thea's star is just like taking Bryce back to the rest of the star?
I think it's romantic for Adis. It's the idea that his mate's power could be reunited and reborn.
That's not romantic.
I think it's romantic for him.
Okay. I mean, he has nothing to do with it, but sure. Fine. Maybe it's romantic for Adis.
When Bryce and Hunt are talking to them in Hell, like Adis reacts very strongly to like I didn't pull these lines, but like he reacts very strongly. He like looks at them like sadly when he's talking about Thea's star and her power. Like I think there's little clues about it, but I don't have the quote, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's fair. It totally could be that. I think it would also be interesting if he was talking about a prophecy that does in fact bring Duskcourt back together. And that is done by bringing Bryce and Azriel together, 2 halves of Duskcourt power. And that could be true of the Star Sword and Truth Teller. It doesn't even need to be Bryce and Azriel, but isn't it interesting that Azriel is the one wielding Truth Teller and Bryce is the one wielding the Star Sword?
Yeah, I firmly believe that prophecy is about the Prythian and the Midgard Fae. I know the Princes of Hell say that Helena made it, but it's like what we've gotten so far is just like so weak. Like, oh, it united all the peoples of Midgard, but it's like, yes, you had one of these swords on Prythian, you have one of these swords on Midgard, and you have Prythian Fae in Midgard, right? It would make more sense for our peoples to be reunited, meaning they are back in one place, probably on Prythian, right? Probably not on Midgard, but they are back in their home world where they came from.
Yes. So I think, that the theory, the part of this theory that involves Azriel is the fact that he clearly has some dusk magic, but only half, and Bryce has the other half. So are they made to rule Dusk Court together? Maybe. I don't know. Then you send me a Reddit post from Emily's theories also hypothesize that Azriel is actually Adis's descendant because of the following points. And so in this case, right, Thea and Adis would be reunited in their ancestors in this theory, right? Like if Bryce is Thea's descendant and Azriel is Adis's descendant and they come back together and they get together, then that would be romantic for Adis because their descendants are reunited. I don't know whether I would feel good about that because it would kind of be like family, but that's cool. We've done incest here. So, all right. So Azriel is Adis's descendant. Key points here. If Adis is not being cloaked in shadows by Apollyon, then we can conclude that Adis has shadow powers. Azriel also has shadow powers. Azriel has been described with cold skin before, and Adis, of course, is from hell, which is quite cold. Bryce tries to go find Adis, like that is where her will is trying to take her, is specifically to Adis, and she ends up to Azriel at Azriel's feet. Azriel's wings are described as demon's wings. Azriel's scent is night chilled mist, which I actually love because I do think that this is meant to be linked to Avallen.
Well, I think it works for the prison just as well, right? Night chilled mist might even work better for the prison because the prison's technically a night court.
Yeah, either one.
Yeah.
I want it to be dusk, but yeah. Night chilled mist, either one. I just love that that's Azriel's scent.
Well, but it's night chilled mist and cedar, and Hunt's scents are cedar and something else. But it implies that they might both be of hell.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they might both be the plan for Bryce.
Yeah.
So love that too. And then he was worthy of wielding Truth Teller, which I think is critically important. So I like the idea of Azriel basically being Prythian plan and like maybe Hunt imitation. I like the idea that they were both made for Bryce and like maybe in another alternate universe where Bryce is on Prythian, she ends up with Azriel. But I also could see a world in which there is a reason that Bryce and Azriel are the two people who are wielding the knife and the sword at that specific time. And I think that would be interesting if that were the case. The bonus chapter stuff, like I'm annoyed that I didn't know that it existed until yesterday. Because I do think it's interesting as well.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, for sure. I have a lot. I do want to go through this Emily's theories post in a bit more detail, but I'll try to keep it quick because I know we're kind of running out of time here. But I just want to say right off the bat, this post is the Emily's theories post. It's titled Theory and an Unpopular One. At that, these two characters are mates. I think this is an incredible post. I think the amount of things, because this was written before House of Flame and Shadow, and the amount of things that Emily gets right in this post, I think is really, really, really incredible. And I would say the only thing that was kind of missed and that I would not have seen coming, and that I don't know that I would have seen any of this coming, is that Hunt ends up being a Prince of Hell, right? And I basically think most of the things she says here, the idea of Bryce being united with someone from hell is what ended up happening. It's just that it's Hunt instead of Azriel, which is kind of out of left field. And I also want to say Emily has since said she no longer supports this theory after House of Flame and Shadow came out. We also know Sarah J. Maas has gone on the Call Her Daddy interview and said, no, this is not happening. So this is just kind of like an exercise, I think, for us to talk about it, what we agree with, what we don't agree with. But I just kind of want to put that disclaimer in here. So a little more about this theory before we dive in. So Emily says right off the bat, I do not hate Hunt. He is great. I do not hate Hunt and Bryce's relationship. Their love is real and compared to other SJM couples, very healthy. I am not Sarah J. Maas. I am not here to convince you that this is canon. I am suggesting that this is one possibility of many that could eventuate in future books. If you are someone who holds your ships close to your heart, this theory may not be for you. I do not want any more shippers in my DMs personally insulting me over theories. Please be respectful and try to keep an open mind. At the end of the day, these are fictional characters. I think that's a great disclaimer, right? She's saying, I like Hunt and Bryce together. This is just where the text is leading me. I love that. I'm all here for it. So let's dive in a little more. She says, here's what we know and can make an educated guess about. Queen Thea, the OG Starborn wielder, lived in Prythium 15,000 years ago and ruled what later became the Dust Court. Thea had a lover, Prince Adis. He is a demon, Prince of Hell. Ultimately, for whatever reason, the island became a mix of the Starborn Fae, taking after Thea's side, and those with darkness powers, such as winnowing and shadow manipulation, taking after Adis's side. So I don't think we hold that theory, right? We think kind of everyone on the island was descended from Thea and someone, we don't know who that was, but because Selena and Helena had both light and shadows, I don't think there's necessarily a distinction between there being a light side of this power and a shadow side of this power, the way that Emily has it here, but I don't know that that matters. This then later formed the Dusk Court, as dusk is the crossover point between the light and the dark. It also explains Queen Thea's two weapons, the Star Sword wielded by Bryce, which glows with a bright white light, and Truth Teller, the matching knife wielded by Azriel, which glows with a dark black light. However, it is assumed that something went wrong for the people of Duskcourt. We know that on the prison island, there is a harp that can open portals to different worlds. In A Court of Silver Flames, Nesta touches the harp, and we get the sense that people, presumably those of the Duskcourt, are still trapped/buried alive within the prison. However, despite some being trapped, it is suggested that the rest of the Duskcourt, using the harp/horn or something else, left for Midgard, as the Asteri wanted. These people are the Avallen Fae. They are said to follow the old ways. Bryce notes that they dress the same as the Prythian people, and the Avallen Fae have the aforementioned darkness abilities, which is why Bryce's star, which glows for people from Prythian, glowed for Cormac. This is all before Hofast, right? Like, this is all, she's guessing all of this before Hofast, which is pretty good. She then goes on to discuss the prophecy and calls out two key lines. So when recalling this prophecy, Bryce has an unshakable feeling that fate or the gods or something is guiding all of this and that it is bigger than anything they can grasp. That's the key line here. Such a thought sends a chill down Bryce's spine. It is for this reason that I don't believe this prophecy is to be downplayed, as many do, especially in attempting to squash the Bryce and Azriel theories. It cannot be coincidence that the two people wielding these fated weapons are Bryce and Azriel, and when has SJM ever been one for coincidence? Further, in the final moments of CC2, when the two weapons are finally near each other, Bryce likens them to Alpha and Omega. This term means the beginning and the end, and typically has two usages. It is used to describe a god and is also used as a motif with everlasting love. So I've already said, I agree. I think the prophecy still needs to be played out. I think the prophecy is important and has not been fulfilled yet. And we also know that Rhys and Feyre are said to be a song with a beginning, with no beginning and no end. She says, this leads me to the crux of this theory. It is not mere weapons that are going to unite the Duskcourt once more. It is the people who wield them. Who better than Thea's descendant and Adis's descendant, Bryce and Azriel? One with the starborn powers, one of the shadow powers, one of the light, one of the dark, both making up the two halves of the Duskcourt. So this is what you were talking about before. I think the problem with this is that we don't know. We've talked about, we don't see Adis wield shadows. We don't know that Adis wield shadows, right? We've only really seen Apollyon wield shadows and then bring other people into his shadows with him, but we haven't seen Adis do it. So we don't know that Azriel is Adis's descendant. And we also don't know that anyone from Duskcourt is Adis's descendant either, for the same reason, because we haven't seen Adis wield shadows. So I could see the bones of this House of Flame and Shadow, but I can't see it post. Emily then goes on to say that she thinks Bryce will return to Duskcourt to rule as High Lady or Queen. I also think that Bryce will return to Prythian. Like, I believe that. I'm a firm believer of Bryce going back to Prythian. We've talked about her power being the only one to rule the Star Sword, and I've said I think that the island has chosen her as High Lady. I see the arguments here. I do see the arguments here, but I think that Hunt is actually a stronger argument at this point, now that we know that he is of Hell and he is of Apollyon, even though he doesn't really have the shadow power. And I don't feel like Bryce is like necessarily missing dusk power, right? She has all three pieces of Thea's star. I think like Bryce has the complete dusk power, and she says that Celine's piece of her star has that darkness to it. So I see the bones of it. I see where it's coming from, and I get it. I just think that post Hofast, it doesn't really work anymore. I think the other thing for me that's really big with this theory, when you look at the way that Bryce thinks about Hunt when she's in Prythian versus the way she thinks about Azriel when she's back in Midgard, they're completely different, right? So like when she thinks about Hunt when she's in Prythian, we get Bryce knew her blood-soaked clothes now stiff and dark, and her blood-crusted hands did her no favors. It was the Harpy's blood and a bit of Lydia's, all coating Bryce as a part of a careful game to keep her alive, to keep their secrets safe, while Hunt and Rune had. Her breath began sawing in and out. She left them, her mate and her brother. She left them in Rigelus's hands. So she starts having like a panic attack. She'd believed that just destroying the Asteria would be as simple as obliterating the First Light Core, yet Erd had sent her here to the original world of the Midgardian Fae. She'd had no choice but to trust Erd's judgment and pray that Rune, that Hunt, that everyone she loved in Midgard could hold on until she found a way to get home. So she's saying she loves them. She needs them to hold on until she gets home. What was happening to Hunt, to Rune? Were they even? She wouldn't let herself think about it. Every minute here counted. Every minute left Hunt and Rune in Rigelus's hands, if they were even still alive. Hunt, Rune, Mom, Dad, Fury, June, Syrinx. She whispered their names, fighting the tightness in her throat. So she's like thinking about Hunt and choking up. Nesta angled her head, then reached into her pocket. What about this? Her phone. With Nesta's movement, the lock screen came on, blaring bright in the gloom with Hunt's face right there. His beautiful, wonderful face, so full of joy. Here, Nesta said. Bryce wordlessly took the phone, blinking back her tears at the sight of Hunt. You kept your word and winnowed us, so take it. So she's literally like fighting tears. She flashed the screen at Nesta and Azriel. That's Hunt, she said hoarsely, my mate. Azriel peered at the picture. He has wings. Bryce nodded, throat unbearably tight. He's an angel, a Moloch. But talking about him made the burning in her eyes worse, so she slid the phone into her pocket. Whirls and faces, and the hair on her arms rose. These are Midgard's constellations. Bryce pointed to a cluster. That's the Great Ladle, and that's Orion, the hunter. Hunt, her Hunt. So like every time she thinks about Bryce, thinks about Hunt, it's like incredibly emotional, right? It's like incredibly overwhelming for her. She has trouble with it. Mm-hmm. She talks about Azriel 3 times after leaving Prythian. So first time she's thinking about his siphons. She refrained from mentioning how the blue stones Azriel had wielded, how they'd condensed and directed her power. Instead, she drawled, and this is a good use of your time because... So like no emotion there, right? She thinks about how she landed at his feet because of Truth Teller. We get with the star sword in hand, she'd gone right to Truth Teller, landing on that lawn mere feet away from Azriel and the dagger. Still no emotion. She thinks of him and Nesta as good people. So this is a friendly connotation, but not choking, sobbing, choking up. She hadn't gone to that underworld only because of the sword and knife or to find some magic bullet to stop the rot in her own world. She knew that now. Erd had sent her there to see, even in the small fraction of their world that she'd witnessed, that Fae existed who were kind and brave. She might have had to betray Nesta and Azriel, trick them, but she knew at their cores they were good people. So here we have her saying, yeah, Erd did send me to that world and did send me to Nesta and Azriel, but it was to show me that they were good people and that Fae could be good people and that I can be a good leader to the Fae, right? They don't all need to be condemned. So like it's friendly, but it's not the emotion that she seems to feel with Hunt. So, like, again, I'm not here to change anyone's mind. I think there's a lot of interesting bones to this theory. I think Emily's theories, Emmy Ego, did a really, really great job of putting this together, especially pre-Hofast. Like she got so much right. And I think it's really great. I think post-Hofast, it's kind of a totally different ballgame though. I think the reveal of Hunt's lineage ties into the ideas that Emily was saying. I do think Bryce goes back to Prythian. I do think she becomes High Lady of Dusk, but I don't see why Hunt wouldn't kind of be part of that. I think whatever happens between her and Hunt when they're together, when their powers merge, is bigger than kind of anything we have seen thus far in a bonded pair or a mating pair within the Maasverse.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's personally for this whole, if we're talking about devil's advocate against ourselves for this entire episode, I think there is much more to be said about why Bryce and Hunt are not the same types of mates. I'll just say why they're not mates than there is for why Bryce and Azriel would be. I struggle much more with Bryce and Azriel connection than I do with Bryce and Hunt and their matehood, because I had no issue going in and myself and finding stuff to look at there. And then with Bryce and Azriel, I had to lean more on other people's work.
I like the seed of that theory, which is that the light and the shadows need to be kind of reunited again.
Yeah.
I like the seed of that, and I like the idea, okay, Bryce has starlight, Azriel has shadows. We need to combine these two powers again. Whether or not that turns out to be true, I don't fully know, but I like that as the like cornerstone of this theory. I see where that's coming from. But I don't think it works with the character beats, the language, the plot that we've been given of this story thus far. Yeah.
The one tiny thing that I actually think would be like really fun if this ended up mattering. And again, I like Hunt and I want him to live, and I like Azriel and I want him to find love, preferably that he's not home wrecking. When we've wondered, right, like why Azriel says you would feel it if your mate died, and Bryce has died. So is that how like if this were the case and that were how Azriel knew? That would be fun. That would be fun.
When Bryce opens the second portal to Prythian, I think the fact that she opens a portal to Hunt proves that her and Hunt are mates when she doesn't know where he is, right? I think that proves it. And I think when she opens the portal to Azriel, we have the truth teller explanation, which makes sense. But the second time she opens a portal to Prythian, although she's opening a portal to a place she's never been, so that is a little inconsistent, but she opens it to Nesta, right? She doesn't open it to Azriel. She opens it to Nesta. Maybe she's opening it to because Nesta has the mask, so maybe the trove can feel each other. But she opens it to Nesta, not Azriel again. And I would kind of think if she was opening it to an unknown place in Prythian, she would once again open it to Azriel if they were mates. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've talked myself out of that one. I don't know. This isn't an episode with answer.
No answers. We don't have answers.
I will say, after doing a lot of digging into Bryceriel and whether or not Hunt and Bryce are mates and coming up with all the reasons it doesn't work, I am still in the camp that they are mates. Like I still think Sarah did enough in this text to convince me that they are mates. Maybe they are a different kind of mates. Maybe the mating bond isn't as strong on Midgard. Maybe the parasite fucked with it somehow. I don't know, but I am still of that opinion.
Yeah. I think they're mates. I think they are different. I think they have to be. I think they've been written differently. Like they don't have the same types of, the same types of bonds. So,
which I do think that the lack of the physical bond and the power mixing could be where a lot of this comes from. Could be where a lot of this, they're not mates talk comes from. I still think they're mates. I just think it's mates and or mates or, like something different, perhaps.
Yeah. All right. Pre-Cog Corner. Abby, what is your Pre-Cog Corner theory?
It's truly a nothing burger of a Pre-Cog Corner. But okay, so I know a lot of the reason in my research into Bryceriel, a lot of the reason that people wanted Bryceriel to be a thing is because they're itching for a cross-universe romance, especially because Sarah set it up with Thea and Adis, right? I want that too. To be clear, I think that'd be really fun. But I think if it does happen, it will be next generation and it will be with Nyx and Bryce and Hunt's future child, potentially, which would be fucking wild. That would be so crazy. That'd be so crazy. That'd be so crazy.
Unstoppable.
I don't know what that would be. What would that baby be? Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That'd be wild.
But that would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Okay. My Pre-Cog Corner theory is it's probably nothing as well, but we have been told that Thea's star and Thea's power is what is needed to activate the power of the blades, and that Thea chose not to wield the power of the blades in the first battle, and that Hel was not there. I would like to hypothesize that Hunt's power, that Hel's power, Apollyon's power, might also be needed to activate the power of the blades, and that is why Thea could not use them. She actually couldn't use them in the first wars. The only time that we see those two blades work, right? Because in the second black hole, Bryce activates the kill switch. Like that's where that black hole comes from. So we see the blades used on Polaris. And when those blades are used on Polaris, Hunt's hellfire is all over those blades. Yeah. And we hear it, right? We see it in the text. So Polaris's face twisted with agony, and still the world kept slowing. Tendrils of Hunt's hellfire twined down the blade into Polaris herself. Lightning danced over Bryce's teeth, over her shocked eyes. He expected an outward explosion, expected to see every last bit of Asteri bone and brain rupture shard by shard, but instead, Polaris imploded. Her chest caved in, sucked into the blades as if by a powerful vacuum, followed by her abdomen and shoulders, and Polaris was screaming and screaming until he saw it just a flash so fast that in real time, he'd never have witnessed it, the tiny inky dot the two blades had made right where they met. The thing Polaris had been sucked into, a black dot. It was there and then gone as Bryce stumbled forward and the blades separated and time resumed so fast, Hunt lost his breath. So a couple things there, right? One, the blades working created a very small black hole, very small, that I know they were commenting on how it was pretty scary, but like it actually worked fine, right? It just took Polaris and like Bryce kind of like stumbled forward, but like it was relatively controlled. So it was not actually that scary. And then Hunt's Hellfire went into Polaris over Bryce's teeth all over the blades. So even though we have been told Thea's power is all that's needed here, is it possible that it's Thea's power and Apollyon's and Adas's, and that's why Hell was fighting. Maybe that's why Adis and Apollyon were fighting. And the fact that Adis was gone and the fact that Apollyon was gone, Hell was not there when Thea lost, is why she was not able to use those blades. And why she lost.
I like that too because of what we talked about last week where you said the Thunderbirds can imbue blades with their power. And this is after Hunt has hit the Star Sword with his lightning. I mean, it was like a book and a half prior, but it's after Hunt has hit the Star Sword with his lightning in the Bone Quarter. And I mean, we see someone forging some sword with lightning, so I don't know. Yeah, but it would be interesting, right? If the sword was originally forged, because what Hunt's lightning seems to be doing there is like closing the black hole, right? So like, is some piece of the sword missing? The piece that would have closed it? Has that been removed and then Hunt is like replacing it? I don't know. Very interesting.
Don't know. That's it. All right. Well, that is all we have for you today. I don't know how long this episode is going to be edited down to, but right now we are at 3 hours and 5 minutes. So I am tired, but thank you for sticking with us.
Anything I said. Truly anything.
I think we're going to cut like half of what I said about Bryceriel. So thank you so much for listening. We've got a Discord. It's very fun. Dragons in the Details is the server. We are on all the social medias, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. We have a Pinterest floating out there somewhere. Dragons in the Details pod on all of those. We now have a Patreon. So if you would like to support us, we have a few different options on Patreon, ad-free listening, written content if you want to be able to read and search theories. That is available to you there. And then we have our sister series, Dragons After Dark, exclusive there as well, save for the first few episodes that are out everywhere. If you want to get a taste of what those are like, those are public. And we have a bookshop. That link is in the show notes. That's really all I have for you today. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked our episode, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe wherever you're watching. It really helps us out. And thank you so much. Love you. Bye.
Bye.